Good evening. I call to order the public hearing for the item pertaining to bylaw number 19 dash, are we doing 14? 16 is the one that's first, sorry. Public hearing for council pertaining to bylaw number 19-16. The public hearing is held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act RSA 2000, Chapter M-26, and amendments thereto. And I hereby declare the public hearing relating to bylaw number 19-16 now open at 7:06 p.m.
Your Worship, bylaw 1916 amends the land use bylaw from Central Business District to direct control to allow for the use of a crematorium. Bylaw 1916 was published in the Strathmore Times on October 18th, 2019 and October 25th, 2019.
Thank you, Jennifer. The following rules of conduct will be followed during the public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point and shall be limited to 3 minutes in length. The order of presentation shall be the administration, followed by those in favor of the bylaw, those opposed to the bylaw, any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw, and council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes. And there will be no debating the bylaw. To date, 6 open house feedback forms, 1 letter of approval, and 1 letter of opposition have been received. Does the administration have any comments?
Your Worship, we received 1 more letter dated November 4th from Mr. Reg McRae. It's been provided to council at your desk.
Is there anyone present who supports the bylaw who wishes to speak? And if you do, would you come to the podium and introduce yourself and then speak, please?
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. My name is Glenn Van Bussel. I'm one of the owners of Wheatland Funeral Home. Really what I wanted to come before you with is just some information about a crematorium and this particular unit that we wanted to install or hope to install. I have put together a slideshow that I wanted to show you. I can see in your hands that you have it all printed out. Is there one here? Second one there. Yep. Perfect. So there's a few things that I could, certainly address in the meantime while we wait for this to load up. I do have a lot of information regarding emissions and those sort of concerns that, of course, are some of the biggest questions that we receive as far as a crematorium goes. As well, I can talk about some of the information, regarding smoke or odors or anything like that that is often a concern here. This PowerPoint will take up most of the time I have here, so if you have any questions about emissions, I'm always happy to answer those afterwards. I did just get a package to everyone here today. I apologize that I didn't have this information. The report was just given to me just about 5 or 6 days ago, and so I was able to, with it, compare it to what Alberta's guidelines are, what Ontario's guidelines are, and sort of give it in a more compact, package for you to see, so you're not comparing everything yourselves and trying to figure out what's relevant and what isn't. did it, yeah. Okay. So I apologize for the delay. So we've been in Strathmore since 1983. Various locations, primarily down at this location where we currently are, on Lakeside Boulevard and First Avenue. I apologize for reading off of the sides a little bit. This first one is showing a video. This is roughly where our chimney stack will be for the crematorium. So this is showing basically what everyone will be able to see, or who will be able to see it, that sort of thing. So as you can see, it's not far down the street. It certainly won't be above any businesses or downtown that will be able to see this at all. You will see it driving past our building, down either Lakeside Boulevard or First Avenue. I can let this play through if you're interested to see it all. It is just cell phone video, so it is a little shaky. All right, so this does show again, that downtown will not see this chimney whatsoever. There are a few locations about 3 doors down from us, and I think 2 across the street that will see it. Everybody else, won't have a chance to see it at all in its current location. So this is the unit we're looking to install. It's called the Pyrox X1000. This is the base unit that Pyrox installs. It's their base machine. This is rated for 4 to 5 cremations a day at the very maximum, all right? We do roughly 100 cremations a year, which is 1 every 3 days. So this is well beyond anything we'll ever need. There'll certainly be no request to ever upgrade or have to change this unit. It is ordered with the optional feature shown in white as opposed to shown in gray. What that does is it'll actually keep the sound down a little bit. It also provides a better visual presentation. And it has constant monitoring. The technology on this is always in contact with Pyrox, and we'll always be able to see what's going on with it. It keeps track of everything from what the burners percentage are going at, what the current temperatures are, what the air intake is. If there's ever a problem, before we even have time to see it and react, it makes adjustments automatically. It also sends us alerts if there's any problems. All right, finally, it is made in Canada. Now this is the actual unit itself with the front removed. So top chamber is where the casket would be loaded. The bottom chamber is what's called the secondary chamber. With this, it's what's considered a hot hearth design. So it uses less energy because the bottom chamber stays extremely warm and the top chamber is kept warm accordingly. Again, there is constant monitoring of the temperature to make sure they stay at the levels they're supposed to be. From the side view, this is more the left side of the machine, if you were looking at it from the front. So again, the primary chamber is where the casket is placed to be cremated. It runs anywhere from about 650 to 850 degrees Celsius. Secondary chamber, air is pushed into that. That is where the secondary burning is. This is where any smoke or odor or any particulates that cause that are burned off entirely. Any bylaw or any laws in Alberta that deal with secondary chambers and incinerators have a limit of at least 870 degrees. This unit runs at about 1,005 to 1,050 at all times. Again, constantly monitored. We don't have to watch to make sure it stays there. If anything goes or starts to go awry or starts to change during the process, it automatically adjusts. Now this is the top down just of the secondary chamber, just so you can see sort of direction of airflow through it. It pushes the air from the one side into the other. This gives it the time it needs in order to burn off any secondary particles. And again, that's what gets rid of the smoke and odor. It's not a filtration system afterwards that filters out smoke or odor or anything like that. It's all done mechanically just with high temperature. On the other side of the unit, this is where the chimney is. So it pushes all the way around the secondary chamber out the chimney. That chimney stands roughly 20 feet, we're told almost 21 feet above ground level. The air coming out of that ranges I've seen ratings anywhere from about 400 to 550 degrees Celsius of the air as it comes out of the top of that chimney. There is no smoke or odor. There is heat waves. You can see the refraction in some cases, but even steam from a furnace, you would see the steam from a furnace. You will not see anything from this except on extremely cold days. All right. There is a laser sensor that shoots through the chimney itself. It has an opening in it, so it checks for any smoke or anything like that, and again, makes adjustments if it detects anything in there. Okay. This unit is the exact same unit that's installed at Lyle Reeves Funeral Home in High River. So what I'll show you, it's just a short video. The black stack in the back, that is the chimney from the crematorium. It is currently operating. There is a body being cremated. What you'll actually see is nothing. It's about -8 degrees Celsius outside at this point. So there is nothing coming out of the stack itself. The only smoke you see is actually from their high efficiency furnace that's blowing out a chimney on the side. So that's your difference between the two. So again, this is the exact same unit here. Now the addition and the reason we ask for this in Strathmore, and we ask for you to consider this bylaw change, this will give us direct control over timeline of cremations. We run into situations where either a family wants the cremation done quickly, or this time of year we've run into snowstorms where we haven't been able to get into the crematorium in Calgary in a reasonable amount of time due to highways being closed or not being safe to put employees on it. It also creates a more convenient and trusted location. Some people do choose to witness a cremation. In the event of that, what we currently have to do is arrange for a place in Calgary, drive the family to that location, do everything there, and then if they want to come back with us or not, then they're left in the care of someone else. This allows a family peace of mind knowing that we are always in control of their loved one. So they have chosen us for a reason, they trust us, we work on that, and they, are assured that we are always in control of that person for them. And again, it's local support for a business that's been in Strathmore for over 35 years. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. As I said, if you have any questions about this or any emissions or anything like that, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Thank you. And it was remiss of me to not have administration do their presentation. So if you wouldn't mind returning
Not
to
at
your
all.
seat, and I'll have administration come forward. And then we'll hear from anyone present who opposes the bylaw. So my apologies for skipping past you, but
Is it okay? Yeah. It doesn't have videos anymore, so it should be fast.
And then just have one.
Good evening, Your Worship. My name is Renee DeMolitor, and I'm here this evening to present Bylaw 1916 for second and third readings. On October the 2nd, 2019, Council held the first reading. There we go. As outlined in the report, a land use application has been received for the parcel located at 202 Lakeside Boulevard, which houses an approved discretionary use of funeral services. Am I not close enough? My apologies. I'm usually quite loud. Okay. The application proposes to change the existing land use designation from central business to a direct control to allow for the use of crematorium. For site context, to the north of the site sits the Lutheran Church on P1 Public Service District land. Directly to the west is a public lane and single-family housing, as you saw in Glenn's video as well, along First Avenue, located under high-density residential R3 district. And to the south is Chinook Financial, located in the Central Business District. And to the east is Lambert Park, and this is also on Public Service District land. The proposed discretionary use of crematorium is requesting one natural gas-fired cremation unit. The applicant, Wheatland Funeral Home, is proposing to install a retort unit into the existing building along the west side adjacent to the lane. Exterior changes would include the addition of a roof vent stack and sidewall air intake next to the lane. There's a star marked on the map here, and that's the approximate location of where they would be installing that. The crematorium is not currently a crematorium is not currently a defined use under Land Use Bylaw 1411, and the Direct Control Bylaw 1916 outlines proposed conditions relating to maintenance, noise, complaints, and hours of operation. Administration conducted a site visit in July to High River, Alberta, and met with the manager of planning to discuss planning and land use applications of the 2 crematoriums that are in operation in downtown High River. Under the High River Land Use Bylaw, the crematoriums are located on Central Business District, with the newest one located directly adjacent to residential land uses. Administration also met with Craig Snodgrass at Lyle Reeves Funeral Home at the same time, which has been in operation since December 2018. The Pyrox retort unit is the same unit which Wheatland Funeral Home is proposing in Strathmore. From the street, you could see a clear heat refraction along with a low hum that you could hear from the unit as it was in a cool down phase. And it was comparable to that of a furnace. The cremation retort unit at Lyle Reeves Funeral Home was surrounded by double insulated walls to dampen sound attenuation. Wheatland Funeral Home also plans to provide double insulated walls with the addition of sound dampening attachment on the retort unit as well. The unit is computerized and can be controlled remotely or by a panel on the front. And this picture on the bottom here shows the unit at the Lyle Reeves Funeral Home and the control panel on the front. And then it also shows the stack. This is taken, you can't see the stack because it's kind of hidden by the front, but it's located directly behind there. There's a laser check, and which checks for the opacity of any smoke that may be coming out of the unit. And it's located on the side of the stack. There's an arm that you can see in the photo on the right, and that shoots a laser through the stack and would shut down the machine if there were any checks that didn't meet their standards. Administration also spoke to the neighboring business. Their business is called The Barber Shop, and it's located directly adjacent, so you can see the window on the photo on the far left. Right next to that building is just a few feet away is the barber shop, and it's located near the stack and the air vent intake. So I spoke to the owner there, and the owner indicated she reported no impacts or disturbances. She just said it sounds like a furnace. Crematoriums are located within funeral homes, which are frequently located next to residential land uses in numerous places within the city of Calgary. So I took a look at the city of Calgary, trying to see where we had funeral homes or where they had funeral homes that were in close proximity right next to residential, and there were 8 out of 14 that I could find that were right next to residential land uses. These are actually limited under the bylaw through City of Calgary bylaw to 1 retort unit within a funeral home, and they're also found on commercial land use districts. A public open house was held by Wheatland Funeral Home on the evening of August 29th, 2019, and approximately 15 people were in attendance. Administration was present to answer any planning-related process questions and to collect feedback forms. Comments received were in support of the application, and they're actually included as part of the package in the report. Public circulation was also conducted through land use amendment circulation process as outlined in the MGA. and letters of development notification were circulated by Canada Post to the surrounding properties in a radius of 100 meters, which is what the photo shows here, the 100-meter radius, on September the 3rd and again on October the 9th, 2019. To date, 2 letters of support have been received and 1 letter of objection has been received. The Strathmore Times published the land use amendment application notice for 2 weeks on October 18th and October 25th of 2019. The proposed land use application meets the intent of the Municipal Development Plan, sections 2.3.6, promoting Strathmore as a strong business centre with new and innovative industries, section 3.2.13, consideration of commercial services that serve the needs of the community and integration into residential areas, section 3.3.10, encouragement of local enterprises within downtown, and also the direction of Downtown Central in supporting a broad range of commercial within the Central Business District. The crematory regulation under the Cemeteries Act of Alberta and all regulations therein apply to this application. Maintenance and operational regulations under the crematory regulations dictate that the owner of a crematory shall ensure that the crematory is maintained in good order and is operated so that it does not give rise to any offense or public health nuisance. Under the Code of Practice for Small Incinerators through the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, an incinerator used as part of a crematory that is licensed under the Cemeteries Act does not require EPEA authorization. Section 1.2 in the Code of Practice for Small Incinerators, subsection N5, defines a small incinerator and states, but it does not include an incinerator that is used for burning human bodies at a crematory that is licensed under the Cemeteries Act. However, crematories shall meet the air emissions limits stipulated in Substance Release Regulation AR 124/1993 for opacity and particulate matter, which is for no more than 40% opacity and 0.20 grams per kilogram of effluent. Annual licensing through the Alberta Funeral Services Regulatory Board is required, which include the provision of inspections by the AFSRB. Alberta Health Services have been circulated by administration and recommend the applicant develop an air sampling program that would include before construction and after implementation to develop baseline ambient air quality data to determine if there are any air quality issues of concern. AHS have also asked the applicant to develop and create a communications and complaint response plan, as well as there are annual inspections that are done by Pyrox themselves. It's my understanding that that is to maintain the quality of the machine. Currently, crematorium services are not available within the town of Strathmore or the regional area. The Wheatland Funeral Home utilizes businesses within City of Calgary limits for cremations. This results in an approximate 100-kilometer round trip for funeral home employees, grieving families, and religious groups who wish to witness the cremation of a loved one. The proposed crematorium is consistent with the objectives of the Municipal Development Plan, is within a commercial land use district, and is in line with the bylaws of High River and the City of Calgary for funeral homes, providing 1 retort unit. Provincial regulations of the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act under the Substance Release Regulation govern emissions in relation to opacity and the particulate size. Development and building permit applications would be anticipated to follow. At that time, detailed formal review processes would be conducted, and any applicable conditions would be included in the subsequent permits. Development Authority supports the addition of a crematorium within the town of Strathmore. The inclusion would support local business and provide a needed service to residents and those in the surrounding area. Development Authority requests Council give second and third reading to Bylaw 1916. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee, for your presentation. Is there anyone present for the bylaw and would wish to speak now? Would you please come forward and introduce yourself, and we'll hear you. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Nikki Lynch. I am a local business owner, as well as I own with my family about 7 residential properties within a vicinity of this operation. I've looked at the Crematory Act and all of the rest of the regulations that relate to it. and they are not required to have EPA standard testing for errors and emissions. They are governed by the Cemeteries Act that states that they do have to follow the, Sustainable Resource Development. I've got a letter, I'm going to read that. When looking at crematoriums specifically and regulations governing them, I found the following. Under the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, they are considered a small incinerator and are exempt under the 5.2 and 5.23 of the Act. The Act states that a crematory is licensed under the Cemeteries Act. The Cemeteries Act specifically addresses the following: municipal zoning and bylaws, licensing, operation and fees, certification of deaths, and unclaimed remains. It speaks nothing in regards to emission standards and testing. Going back to the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, it states that 5.2.3, crematoriums approved under the Cemeteries Act, an incinerator used only to burn human bodies as part of a crematory that is licensed under the Cemeteries Act, does not require an EPEA authorization. However, human body crematories shall remain the air and emissions limits stipulated in the Substance Release Regulation for opacity and particulate matter, 40% and 0.20 grams per kilogram of effluent, respectively. Upon reading the Substance Release Regulation, I found the following. After listing many business applications that will require the above emission standards, Section 8.2, subsection 1 states, it does not apply to the release of particulates from the following sources. A, starting a fire in an incinerator, and that's what they are considered, incinerators. Alberta Environment and Sustainable Resource Development published in November 2012 a guide to the code of practice for small incinerators. Appendix 2, page 29, frequently asked questions is the operation of a human body crematory subject to this code of practice? Their answer is no. Specifically, these units are exempt from registration pursuant to this code of practice. However, the code, it might be useful as a reference. Human body crematories are regulated under the Cemeteries Act and the Crematory Regulation administered by the Alberta Funeral Services. The next question is the operation of a human body crematory subject to emission standards set in the Substance Release Regulation? The answer was yes. In terms of emission standards, the design, construction, and operation of a crematory must respect the emission standards set out in the Substance Release Regulation for PM and opacity. However, when you go back to that, it specifically states that they are exempt because they're considered an incinerator. I placed several calls to find out which regulatory body I could speak with in regards to regulations and received no concrete answers. I came across a document from a Planning and Development Committee of Mississauga, Ontario, prepared by the Commissioner of Planning and Building, dated March 13, 2012, when they were faced with a similar request. It states in part, studies regarding the ability to mitigate the health impacts of crematoriums is inconclusive. But an abundance of caution with crematoriums should be directed away from locations that are in close proximity to residential and to other sensitive land uses, daycares and schools. It was recommended that crematoriums be directed to lands designated industrial, in employment character areas, or cemetery lands designated as open space, adequately separated from residential and other sensitive land uses. Canada's Interior Health Authority did a literature review and concluded that fumes from crematoriums are potentially harmful and they should not be located close to residential areas. In a document titled Public Health Impact of Crematoria, a report by the Chief Medical Officer of British Columbia outlining mercury, dioxin, particulate matter, and other emission concerns, reports state that crematoria could have a negative impact on health and should not be located in residential neighborhoods. Where I agree that Strathmore does benefit from a crematorium, even as a local business owner, I am concerned with gambling, with what may happen with the people living downtown, going to the parks. I would think we would be better off served having it in an industrial area. There have been several studies that have been done that have said they are not a good thing. There are people that will come forward and say, we've done tests that say it's fine. But so have pharmaceutical companies giving people drugs for 10 years just to turn around and say that there's cancer. I think the town of Strathmore should remove themselves from any and all liability and direct it to an industrial area. Especially considering the town office is going to be within a couple blocks radius fairly soon too. I just don't think it should be left to chance. And you guys can see the other document that I'd already presented. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any other people who'd like to come forward who feel they're affected by the proposed bylaw? Yes, would you come to the microphone and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. That's fine.
Thank you. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you, Your Honor. My name's Chris St. Clair. I'm a resident in the downtown area here in Strathmore. And my concern is exactly what Nikki was saying, is about particulate matters and the control of the emissions from this type of facility. And the thing is, there's a lot of downtown businesses, not residential, but I mean dining, you got a bakery, you got a, food preparation and cross-contamination. And I think that if it was in operation, I probably wouldn't patronize or, go to those businesses. So anyway, I think it's a really bad idea. And again, it's right across the street from your proposed new location and a park and everything. And the particulate matters, I think it's unacceptable. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Thank you very much for coming forward and presenting your opinion. Much appreciated. Anyone else? Council, do you have any further questions for our presenters or for administration? Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, I have a question for administration, please. Hi. So one question I have is regards to the letter from AHS, and it says that AHS would like more information about the Pyrox X1000 with regards to the expected emissions. So when you guys sent the kind of, I guess, report with the expected emissions to AHS, what was their comment back about the safety regarding those emissions?
Sorry, through the chair, through your worship. I had spoken to Norm from AHS. We've spoken to him this week, and he is aware of the codes. So he's aware of the SSR and the EPEA, the substance release regulation. He actually spoke to me earlier this week about it, and as far as I'm aware, when he made the comments saying he wanted more information, that was when we first circulated the application, when it first came in. That was early September. So since then, he has, as far as I'm aware, been given the information that he was requesting. He also had commented saying that during the development permit, we could actually put conditions on the permit in regulation, saying things like if there was any issue that we could put a sort of a stop to it, have it investigated or inspected, that kind of thing. And that was also discussion that we had with the applicant, and he's fine with that as well, to be able to put conditions on the development permit as well.
Have you reviewed a list of the possible emissions from this?
Yes, there was a report. I have a copy. There was a report done by Pyrox, and it was I believe it was 2015. I've seen that report, and then also I was given a list. This was just the Alberta air quality. I apologize, I don't have the report in front of me from Pyrox itself, but it was a one-day test that they had done, and they had said, they gave us a list of all of the chemicals that would be coming out of it, and I believe Glenn would probably be better to answer that because he's the one who has been looking at the air quality within Alberta, and I believe he has that report for the Pyrox.
Sure. And when you when you recommend to us that we approve this, did you look at any longitudinal studies regarding the effects of these emissions on people?
I did look up emission standards. I didn't look up any kind of studies. We couldn't find any kind of case studies, anything that was actual journals. It was a lot of articles, a lot of newspaper things that we had come across, or I believe Nikki had found one that had stated it was from 2000 or up until 1993, I think from 1950 to 1993. And that was part of the package that she, I believe, included in that. But it had said, you know, there were birth defects and there were other things that had come up. In regards to that, I guess the planning rationale, or what we're looking at is, from a planning perspective, we're looking, does it meet all the bylaws, does it meet all the codes? And then from a health standpoint, we would say that, you know, we would like to get feedback from Alberta Health Services, or, and I mean, we're looking at the regulation through them, and the AFSRB would be the ones who do the actual inspections and licensing. So and that's not really our, I guess, our wheelhouse. So, I mean, from a planning point of view, it meets all planning requirements. And that's where we can recommend and say yes. But, I mean, we don't have any kind of studies that say it either causes or doesn't. And the one that did come out, that did end in 1993, I'm not a person to argue. I'm not a specialist, obviously, but there has been a large technological advance, I'm going to say, since 1993. And
When you say technological advance, you just mean like it's combusted at a higher temperature?
no, so when I went to High River, we saw the crematorium that had been put in a year ago. That was the Lyle Reeves Funeral Home, and the other crematorium that is located right next to the town hall of High River. It's been there about 30 years, and when we looked at that particular crematorium, you can see that one's been in for 30 years, and it has older technology, like an older system. That the stack on that one, it did have like I guess a film on it. And when I asked Craig Snodgrass about it, he had said that's a lot older of a unit. That unit was put in the 1980s. It wasn't up to the same standards. There are now different air quality standards that these machines are put through. That's what he has relayed to us.
Okay. And you didn't come across anything that said that there was no problems associated with this? Like that refuted those studies?
There wasn't a lot of information. Honestly, if you Google, so I tried Googling up a lot of the Pyrox information specifically. I kept going back to the Pyrox site. I was looking for articles, anything that would say, yeah, we have complaints, something from the neighborhood, anything like specifically within Calgary or Alberta, that would say, you know, we've had problems or everything's been great, and there wasn't a lot of information to be found. One thing that we did look at was just looking at where they're located in other cities within Alberta and in which land uses. So in proximity to, like I said, in High River, they're located right next to residential. In a lot of cities, they're actually permitted to be right within the downtown. And I actually created a list of all the cities that I looked at. So I went through the bylaws of quite a long list and looked to see where they were allowed in industrial, where they were allowed in commercial land uses, based on what they were. So for instance, before I get into this, in the city of Calgary, they have a crematorium use, and that's sole standalone use, which allows more than one retort unit, and they are allowed within industrial land uses only. A lot of the towns had the same take. And then when you combine them with a funeral home, they have a limit of one retort unit. So that's the difference between having a standalone crematorium and having a funeral home that allows a crematorium inside. Because the funeral homes with one retort unit are allowed within most of the cities are allowed within the commercial land use district. So I looked at Okotoks, Airdrie, Chestermere, Calgary, Red Deer, Medicine Hat, Canmore, Grand Prairie, High River, Lethbridge, Leduc, St. Albert, and Spruce Grove. Just reading through their bylaws and looking at where they were actually located. So in the city of Calgary, in High River, in Canmore, Grand Prairie, and Lethbridge, and St. Albert, they're all allowed within the commercial land uses and are next to residential places.
And so the two crematoriums that you looked at in High River, when you say like you said one backs on, like one is near residential?
Yes, there's actually, I can show you on the map that we had.
Like, would you say like within 25, 30 feet of a house, or?
Yes, so the Snodgrass Funeral Home is the yellow star on this map. And directly across the street and directly to the east, and then the entire neighborhood to the south are all single-family residential. And then the other crematory in High River is the Blue Star, and that's right next to the town hall, and it actually backs onto their park. And that's the blue one is the one that's been there since the 80s.
Okay, and one or both are owned by the mayor of High River?
Just the one.
Okay.
The other one, I'm not sure exactly who the owner is or if they're in relation. There's also one in Okotoks that I believe is I think it's also a Snodgrass crematorium owned by someone within the same family. I don't believe that's actually Craig, but that one is located in a central area of commercial surrounded by a Safeway, I believe it's a McDonald's, an A&W, I think a Taco Bell. Like they're all food uses right in the same parking lot as the one in Okotoks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, Your Worship, but I just noticed when, it might be Mr. Van Bussel, it might be your administration, but I just noticed in going through the document that Mr. Van Bussel gave to us regarding the Alberta government's ambient air quality objectives summary, I noticed that neither mercury nor polychlorinated dibenzofurans were listed on those. And I was wondering if there was a reason why. Why mercury isn't listed specifically.
I can certainly answer your question, Councillor Peterson. That Alberta ambient air quality objective specifically doesn't apply to crematoriums. So for whatever reason, in creating that, when the EPA decided that would be their guidelines to run by, they have decided that mercury isn't something to test for. What you'll see through the rest of that document is that of all the items that are tested on these machines in Ontario, it's compared to Ontario's, which is the strictest laws in Alberta or in Canada. And where I compared them to what Alberta's guidelines are. So you can see those next to them. In a few cases, Alberta's are actually stricter for those specific ones. Those are highlighted in the yellow for you. And then, but you'll see in all cases, those emissions are well below 1% of what's allowable.
Thank you. So when I was doing research on this, I did find information in two really interesting places. One was in the Creighton Educational data from 2019, where they did an extensive study and found that they need to do more studies. And the other one, the other information came out of Japan, where 99.9% of their population chooses cremation. And so their information was interesting, but they all did cite testing for mercury as something that they would see as desirable into the future, but again, said that the rates were far below the whatever it was, 0.6 tons per cubic meter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Councillor Peterson?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is to administration. Thank you very much for your report, Renee. I would like to know, are there any current independent studies regarding emissions or independent studies that have not involved the Pyrox machine? Like from Pyrox, of course. You referenced that particular study, but has there been independent studies done on the Pyrox machine, not by Pyrox?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge, not that I have actually seen. I did read through the Pyrox study, and I didn't include it in the report actually because it was quite technical. We would need someone who as a specialist, would be a chemist to interpret that for us. A lot of it didn't really make a lot of sense. It kind of, the only pieces of it that we could have used were what said which particulates or which, I guess like you're saying, mercury or which metals were coming out in the emission. But like Glenn said, that's not regulated by the EPEA because the levels are so low. But I didn't see any other studies when we looked for it. I had myself and one other planner looking for quite a few days, just searching for cremation or crematory emissions standards. And there was very little information that we could find that was relative to this project.
And the study that you did reference, the PYROX study, you said that that was a one-day study? Am I clear on that?
Yes, yeah, they did a study,
One
I
day,
believe it
not a
was
week,
May
not a month.
14th to May 15th, and I believe it was in 2015.
2015. Thank you. My next question is for Mr. Van Bussel, please. Mr. Van Bussel, have you considered an alternate site or a Plan B in either an industrial area of our community or perhaps by the cemetery in Strathmore?
We have. We looked around other sites in town, in the industrial area on the other side of the highway. The concerns we have with it is, first of all, it increases the expense because we either have to purchase land or we're leasing it, and when we're putting a machine of that value there to lease the land, you know, when we have the option of the owner kicking us out, didn't make a lot of sense to us. The other thing is that if we have a family present to witness the cremation of their loved one, we wanted it to be in a location that's much, you know, more palatable. The industrial area of town doesn't provide that. You know, so that's where we figured downtown was a much better thing. I guess that really answers that question.
And in your 35 years that you've been in Strathmore, quite proudly, I might add, have you expanded during that 35 years? Or is this your first expansion?
We've expanded our building on several occasions. So in the location we're currently at, first garage was built on back, I apologize, I don't know the year off the top of my head, I was a kid at that point. But a two-car garage was built on, later on a chapel was built on, and 2 years ago we added a three-car garage on the back of the building. This would be an expansion of much larger value and would create much more, you know, value to our clientele and to the town to provide a service that just isn't given elsewhere.
And if we were to build multi-use residential behind you on the side where currently there are homes, how high would they have to be above the stacks?
They would have to be about 20 feet above ground level and not, let me think, to the west. I know that property already sits probably 2 to 3 feet above what the alley is beside it. As you saw in the video, we barely make it over the top of the building that's already there. So if it was 2 stories, it would more than cover what our stack would be or what our building would be.
Thank you very much for your
You're very
question,
welcome.
for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my question is to administration. Sorry, Renee. Sounds like you've been on this file for a while, it sounds like. So a couple of questions. One is back to Alberta Health Services and their recommendation in regards to air sampling, both prior and after construction. I just want to re-clarify that if this was passed, that would be a condition in the permit.
Through the chair, that can be a condition in the permit? Correct. We can put any kind of a development permit condition we would like to have as like a check or balance, and that's definitely something that AHS is recommending.
Great. Okay. So that would be a serious consideration.
Correct. We can have, we have spoken with Glenn in regards to actually doing air quality studies. They may be hard to obtain, just he has mentioned in regards to the construction that's going on currently. However, he's willing to do them. They do cost thousands of dollars to do, and then to try and quantify what is going to be before and after. But I think he's pretty confident that they're going to have very little impact.
Okay. And my second question is, do you know if there's any air quality testing done in the High River one that you've been?
Not to my
dealing with?
knowledge. I could find that out for
And-
administration.
And my third question, I don't know that you can answer this, but I'm curious as to why more than one unit would be regulated to a industrial area in the cases that you've noted. I don't get why more than one would go to industrial if there is nothing coming out of them.
Through the chair, I believe that they've regulated it to one, just from a planning point of view. I'm going to speak as a planner. I think that they've regulated it to one in funeral homes, just to lessen that stigma that comes along with it. I think the ones that are allowed within a crematorium standalone, I didn't see anything in the bylaws regulating to how many they could have. So in essence, then there was no limit. So you could have a unit that potentially had 10 units within it. And I think it's more the stigma. I'm not sure exactly why Calgary does it that way. But from a planning point of view, having one unit within a funeral home where customers would be coming would be sort of more your face, the face of the funeral home. And then having a crematorium, I'm assuming, and maybe Glenn can answer this question a little better, but the ones that are in industrial areas, and perhaps the one that he utilizes, I'm wondering if maybe they are more focused around the funeral home staff rather than, say, families coming there to actually witness a cremation. I think Glenn could probably answer that better than I could.
Before I'll ask Mr. Van Bussel if he wants to comment at all in a second here, but
Sure.
my last request is in spite of the fact that I don't believe any of us at this table are chemists, I would still be interested in acquiring that Pyrex study, even though it's one day prior to completing this study. I'm prepared to adjourn this or motion to adjourn this at that time for that purpose. But before we get to that point, I wonder, Glenn, are you able to comment at all? Do you have any insight as to why multiple units would be regulated to an industrial area?
Really, the only answer I would be able to give you, Councillor Sobel, is that it is an optics thing. The emissions on these machines are so low that there's no concerns. I can speak to many of the questions that were, given to Renee previously. These studies that were done were not done by Pyrox. They are third-party studies in both cases. The issue that Alberta Health Services had with the first study that I sent them is that it wasn't done in the same units of measurement that that the Alberta Ambient Air Quality Objectives goes by, and there's no direct comparison or equation to separate the two. That handout that I gave you folks today is a study that was completed, I think, just about 2.5 weeks ago. It is actually, you'll see a page on there, requesting the information on it. And it's actually to have 3 units running 24/7 and making sure they stay within the guidelines. And in all cases, they still do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine is for also administration, but more Trent, actually. As a fire chief, would you see any issues with having this post-residential?
We were in the initial conversations, and we went through the material quite extensively and had lots of questions. And based on the information that we were provided and the material that we read, we had no concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. And I just have, Councillor Cox, I didn't see your red light.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is also for administration, not sure who, but I'm curious as to say how many residential or how many persons would you say are in that radius that you generally said? Because I'm just, in my mind, we're saying that it could possibly harm people in residence, but why can't it harm people in
industrial areas. All of our industrial areas have a significant amount of people as well. So I'm confused as to if we leave it where it is, how many people are being affected versus if we move it to an industrial area where there's a bunch of people as well, what difference are we actually making?
Through the chair, I don't believe it would be making much of a difference. I think that if there are no, the emissions are not high enough to be a concern to the Environmental Protection Act, which is actually governed by the Minister of Environment. And through the Alberta Funeral Services Board, they also regulate and license the crematoriums under the, like I said, under the Cemetery Act. And I don't believe that if those governing bodies do not have any issues with placing these in other locations next to residential or in these areas, that I don't think it's going to make much of a difference or any difference to have it, whether it's next to residential and next to a park, or whether it's, and who it's affecting there, or who it would be affecting or not affecting within industrial area.
Excellent, thank you.
I did have one point, if I can address to Bob Sobel as well. In regards to tabling the issue for the reports, this is just currently a land use application, and those reports can also be included at the time of permit. And it could be, if you would like it to be, the development permit can come back for council approval as well at that time, because it does have to go through the development permit stage, and that would be the next step. So it's not, this isn't approving an actual permit. This is just approving the use to be listed in the bylaw, and then also to have it in this particular location. But it's not actually approving anything. So when we show you the pictures of the Pyrox or anything that's going in, the physical actual permit comes in as development permit, and then that's where we can put on, like you said, the conditions and have the report. So we could actually bring that back for approval through council if you would like.
Yes. Jason?
Oh, I thought you were asking me if you could respond.
Thank you, and thank you. But the issue is, getting back to exactly your point, is whether or not this is a permitted use.
It's discretionary through the chair. It's discretionary that they're asking for.
Right.
So it's not a permitted use within the bylaw.
Correct.
That they're asking for.
Our decision is whether or not we're going to allow this type of use in
this location.
In this location.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Sobel, and for Renee. Renee, just before you leave, sorry. I have two questions. One is a question born out of confusion. And my question is, are crematoria bound or not to meet the EPA standards? I've got some confusion on that.
Underneath, so here, I'll show you this slide that I
Yeah,
have.
please.
Sorry. So these are the regulations that I went through. The top one being the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, and then the rest of these regulations fall underneath the EPEA. And when you start digging through them, the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act actually exempts crematoriums from any kind of the registration. So small incinerators typically have to go through registration through the EPEA. And then there is a clause under section, sorry, I've got it under another slide here. Under section 1.2 in the Code of Practice for small incinerators that actually exempts. So some small incinerators, there's actually a guide. One of the pieces is actually a Code of Practice for small incinerators under the EPEA. Then there's a guide to the code, which actually is a lot easier to interpret and written in more layman's terms. And in that, it says some small incinerators do not meet the definition and are exempted under EPEA. And these include, and then the subsection C is a crematory used to burn human bodies licensed under the Cemeteries Act and the AFSRB. So they're not actually regulating, saying you have to have EPEA regulation or registration. They exempt underneath the small incinerator code.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, I see in the letter from Alberta Health Services on September 17th, 2019, under number 3, it says AHS would like more information about the Pyrox X1000, its anticipated expected emissions, and any other devices that may alter emission levels. Did they get more information so that they could update this letter back to us? Is there another letter that?
For your worship, there is no other letter that has
Okay.
come from Alberta Health Services. I
Okay.
do have emails from them.
Yeah.
I have an email from Norm just, I believe it was yesterday, saying that he's aware of the EPEA and the regulations, because when we were speaking in September, he wasn't aware of who actually regulated emissions for crematoriums. And everyone kept sort of saying, oh, well, it's Alberta Health Services. And when I spoke to the AFSRB, I wrote to them, and Karen from the AFSRB wrote me back, and she said, well, it's Alberta Health Services that regulates it. And then Alberta Health Services would say, oh, it's Alberta Environment that regulates it, which is why I went and started reading the acts myself, because I thought that way we can actually find out who regulates it. And it is regulated by the Minister of Environment. When I circulated this application to Alberta Environment, I got back an email saying that they do not want to see applications. Development permit applications, they only have certain types, and that they're very overloaded within Calgary. So I wrote directly to the minister, and all I got back was the automatic response saying, we will respond to you shortly. It was to Jason Nixon, and I haven't heard back from them.
Okay, thank you.
But the development permit would also be circulated to them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for Mr. Van Bussel. Just with regards to the emissions, and maybe I missed it, but is there any carbon monoxide that'll be produced by this?
Not that I've seen. Let me double check the emissions list.
I don't see carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide, so. Which one?
Yeah, not that I see measured for here, so I don't have a solid answer for that. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, because I would presume it must produce some amount of carbon monoxide just with the combustion system that it's using, right?
I would assume so, although I would have to double check some of the information I have. What I did is I printed out the lists for you folks, and I also, I know that Ontario actually tests for over 5,000 items, so for it to not be on their list and requested for would seem strange to me, but I would have to double check it and see.
Yeah, I would really appreciate more information on that, and even some, like, I'm sure you probably looked into it, but some sort of information regarding, like, a study that's been done about, like, the long-term health effects of living near these.
Yeah, actually, some of the information that's in this package that you received both from myself and from Nikki, as a matter of fact, does refer to some long-term studies. The one that I know Renee mentioned earlier about birth defects and whatnot, if you actually read the highlighted conclusion of that study, it states that they can make no conclusion of it. And that's part of it. If you read the entire study, which isn't part of the package, which I did do today, they bring up multiple factors. The fact that there's hazardous waste places nearby some of these crematoriums, and that could easily be it. So different things there. Probably the biggest study, which I know is in that letter from Nikki, was from a crematorium in the United Kingdom, where they tested 5 sites around it. This crematorium had been in operation for 40 years, had done over 122,000 cremations. And what it found was that both upwind and downwind it tested, especially for mercury levels. And they found, of course, upwind had lower mercury levels, but even downwind in the 3 sites that they checked there, they were, I think, 15 times below allowable food production levels and over 100 times lower than allowable playground levels. So there aren't a lot of big studies done. This is just, it's not something that's monitored a lot. It's not something that has a lot of regulations added to it for emissions. And that's because emissions are considered to be so incredibly low for this. And that's why you get just the occasional study like that comes out once in a while that states something. But I haven't found anything yet after weeks of digging through, whether it be articles online and actually finding studies that has said that there should be any detrimental impact. Most of them actually find that, while this isn't a real satisfactory answer, most of the emissions don't stay in the immediate environment. Mercury itself stays in the air for anywhere from 0.4 to 3 years when it's vaporized. I can tell you in 0.4 years, we've had many winds coming from Calgary, and so all those emissions are becoming this way before any emissions we had actually affected anything here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Glenn, don't run away. I was just wondering when I was doing reading about and the various studies that I found, especially the Japanese studies, they talked about remediation equipment on crematoria. So I'm assuming that because this is a new technology, that it wouldn't require what they were talking about. Japan has brought in all kinds of rules around electrostatic precipitation and I think something they called pulse bag filtration. I have no idea what those are, but they talked about putting those in. So in this new technology, is there any need for that?
There could be. I'm not going to ever say there's no emissions from these machines, because that would be a bald-faced lie. In Japan, their population is considerably higher than ours, and they deal with a 99.9% cremation rate. What they found is in their very small area, they needed to find some way to keep what emissions they do have even lower. I saw the machines. I've seen pictures and diagrams of the machines they use. They are bigger than our entire building. It's this huge process added. It's about 5 and 6 times of the crematorium just added onto the machine to remediate everything. The ones that do exist for normal use, for most areas in Canada, North America, UK, that sort of thing, you're looking anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 to put in these machines and mitigate it. And it's not generally considered necessary since mercury is primarily from dental fillings. And realistically, in about a 20-year period, we are naturally going to see mercury levels from crematoriums drop. Okay.
I appreciate that. It's just interesting that we now, that death is now a health issue. That's interesting.
Thanks, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Van Bussel, one last question.
Certainly.
We've been talking so much about air quality, and my question is about the particulate that's left in the incinerator. So I understand some of that will be going to the family, of course.
Certainly.
How do you dispose of the other material that is left in the incinerator, if any? And will there be water and cleaning solutions that will be used, or what is your process for cleaning the machine?
Yeah, so there isn't a lot of, there's no water or anything used to wash down the machine. The inside of the machine is swept out. That means all ash or bone fragments or prosthetics or anything like that that is still left inside the machine gets swept out. Any metal is removed. There's a whole process by which that's done, both by just taking out the larger pieces like joints and that sort of thing, to magnets to remove staples and smaller particles like that. But it's common practice that the machine is swept out and delicately taken care of. But otherwise, there's no wash down of the chamber or anything like that afterwards.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Are there any more questions from councillors? Seeing none, my next question is, does council have all the information they need to make a decision? Councillor Sobel?
I do not, Your Worship. I would still like that report and confirmation from the Alberta Health in regards to question number 3 as to whether or not they're satisfied with the response from administration and that they no longer have any questions regarding the process.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Did you want to weigh in too, Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, I'm interested in getting more information about the carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide emissions that are not mentioned in this report.
Thank you for that. If I can ask a question to our ledge services expert, at this time, Jen, if we don't have all the information, do we need a motion to adjourn this? Or do we just,
Your worship, you would not adjourn the public hearing. You would make a motion to postpone it until a certain date and request that the information you have mentioned comes back at that time.
thank you. And thank you for that guidance. Councillor Sobel?
I'm prepared to make that motion, but my first question, I guess, before I do that, would be to administration as to what length of time would be required to get that information back to council.
Through the chair, I can get the report to our ledge services as soon as possible. I actually have the one Pyrox report, and like Glenn had said, it's done through a third party. I can have that to you within a few days. And then I did hear Glenn mention that there was a second report. This one I'm not aware of. So if he has a second report, we can get you copies of that as well.
That would be great, thank you. Would November 20th be suitable?
Are we looking at a change in that date? Sorry, Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, worship. That I was going to bring that up. That council is looking at this evening at a change to the 20th meeting. Perhaps it would be more suitable to schedule it for the December 4th meeting.
Your worship.
Councillor Cox?
I just, question for administration. If some of us have enough information, but some of us don't, is it automatically that we are adjourning?
Well, I think a motion would come forward to adjourn, and then if you felt you had all the information, you may not support that in your vote then on adjourning to the December 4th date, did you say?
That would be administration's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Sobel, are you prepared to make your motion now?
I do, Your Worship. I move that this hearing be adjourned, postponed rather, to December 4th.
Thank you for that motion. You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion on them? No discussion on that? Seeing that, all in favor of the motion? And opposed? We have 5 in favor of adjourning to December 4th and 2 opposed. And to the public who are here and those who are watching at home, I hope you can understand how serious we're taking this issue. We want to take more time, get more information, and do the right thing in regards to both sides of the issue. It's an important issue, obviously, to a lot of people. So thank you. And Jen, if I can ask you one more procedural question, then do I still declare it closed? No, because we've adjourned it. Okay, thank you. And that brings us to our second public hearing. We'll just have a quick pause while people who are dealing with the other bylaw are exiting. Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to declare the public hearing of council pertaining to bylaw number 19-14 held this November 6, 2019, and we are starting at approximately 8:20 p.m. This public hearing is held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M-26, and amendments thereto. I hereby declare the public hearing relating to bylaw number 19-14 now open at 8:20. And can we have a motion to adopt the public hearing agenda? Councilor, Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
I move accepting this agenda.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And that's adopted. Legislative Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 1914 amends the existing land use bylaw to redesignate 24 properties from R1N to DC in Wildflower Ranch Phase 4. Bylaw 1914 was published in the Strathmore Times on October 18th, 2019 and October 25th, 2019.
Thank you. The following rules of conduct again will be followed during this public hearing. Presentation should be brief and to the point and shall be limited to 3 minutes in length. The order of presentation shall be the administration, followed by those in favor of the bylaw, then those opposed to the bylaw, any other person deemed to be affected by the bylaw, and council may ask questions of the speakers after each presentation for clarification purposes, and there will be no debating the bylaw. And to date, 2 letters of support have been received and 1 petition affecting residents of Wildflower Ranch in opposition. So at this time, we will have the presentation from administration. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Fuel and members of council. Staff received an application to rezone 24 residential lots in Wildflower Phase 4 from R1N to a site-specific direct control district. The purpose of this application is to allow future homeowners in Wildflower Phase 4 to have the option to apply for a secondary suite should they choose to own and operate one. I'd just like to mention that this does not guarantee that a secondary suite will exist on each of the 24 lots. I'd just like to start with a map showing the site context. So these are the subject lands that this bylaw applies to. So as you can see, it's the most northerly portion of the subdivided land that Wildflower Ranch has developed to date. And lastly, before I get into the meat of the presentation, this amendment will only allow a secondary suite to exist in the basement form. So that's the lower left image on the screen. Typically, you can have secondary suites in 4 types, garden suites, detached upper garage suites, and such. Administration is only recommending that this bylaw allows a basement suite. So we're not increasing the gross floor area of the dwelling. The house in Wildflower Phase 4 will look identical to a house in Wildflower Phase 3. The only exception being there's a legal suite in the basement. So there are many benefits to, I guess, introducing and approving secondary suites to a community. Those benefits range from homeowners to the tenants living in those suites to the general community. In the sake of time, I'll just pick out one important point for each. So in terms of homeowners, with the stricter mortgage rules, it's harder and harder for people to qualify for a mortgage, and banks will more often than not look at a secondary suite as, I guess, a form of income to help you qualify for that unit. So if you're a homeowner, these suites are a good income booster and mortgage helper. In terms of tenants, illegal secondary suites exist in almost every community in Canada. And if the town doesn't take the proactive approach to legalize these suites, tenants don't know if the wiring is up to code, they don't know if the plumbing is safe, because we haven't had a building inspector and safety codes officers inspect the unit. So from a tenant's perspective, if we legalize these suites, they'll know that the suite is safe and it's legal for everyone involved. And then lastly, for the community, staff reached out to realtors in Calgary as well as Vancouver and Strathmore about the perceived notion that secondary suites decrease property values. Our research suggests otherwise, that these suites actually increase property values. Based on our research, a secondary suite that's legal can cost anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 to legally install. So if a homeowner's putting that much more equity into their property, the value of that lot's going to increase, which then may have a positive impact on adjacent dwellings. When staff received this application, we reviewed the application against the municipal development plan, and staff is confident that the application is consistent with the residential land use designation for the subject lands, as well as the secondary suite policy in the MDP. And similarly, staff also reviewed the application against the Wildflower Ranch Area Structure Plan. Staff is also confident that this application is consistent with the low-density residential designation that applies to the 24 subject lands. So in terms of affordability and housing choice in Strathmore, staff looked at 2 key documents that have come out in the past few years. The first one is the FCSS needs assessment that was produced in 2016. This report, among many things, outlined the apparent need in Strathmore for more affordable housing. So residents in Strathmore are, to a degree, living in conditions that aren't affordable for them. And one of the recommendations brought forward in this report was that more affordable housing options are introduced to the town. The Wheatland Housing Management Body's Senior Housing Needs Assessment, this is a brand new report that just came out, and staff wasn't able to include this in the report. But we also assessed the application against this study, and this study reaffirms some of the points in the FCSS needs assessment that affordability really is a concern in Strathmore, and we all need to do our part in alleviating the stress on that cohort of individuals. And then lastly, the town has been working to update the municipal development plan over the past few months. So we've held, pop-up events, survey monkeys, and emerging opportunities events where we're engaging with the development industry and realtors and so on. In these types of pop-up engagement events, staff is noticing a significant proportion of the discussion is revolving around affordability and offering more innovative housing choices for residents in Strathmore. This application was submitted as a comprehensive rezoning. So in the planning world, this is arguably the most ideal land use amendment that you can have. When the application was submitted, all of the 24 lots in Wildflower Phase 4 were privately owned by the developer or the two builders that are active up in that area. So what this means is everyone moving into Wildflower Phase 4 in the future, should council adopt this bylaw, will know right up front that secondary suites are allowed in the area, and it's not a surprise to you. So you don't wake up one morning and all of a sudden a secondary suite is allowed next to you. You're aware of that moving forward. And then the image on the left here, so this is a recent Calgary Herald article. So Excel Homes, which is developing Simmons Gate up in the northwest, actually just zoned their last phase as exactly like Wildflower Phase 4. So they're offering homeowners the ability to apply for secondary suites at a comprehensive level. And the feedback to date is that this is being quite successful, and the point of this is that Strathmore isn't the only community experiencing these applications and approving them. We are also seeing these elsewhere. And when communities rezone applications comprehensively, it does tend to cut red tape for the development industry and the home builders, which is encouraging for everyone moving to Strathmore. This is a slide that I'd just like to focus on for a second here. So it speaks for itself, but in 2019 to date, Strathmore has experienced 10 housing starts. And if you compare that to 2015, we had 130 housing starts. So it's fairly evident that we are low on housing starts right now. And this is a problem for the town because we're not seeing new people moving to Strathmore and taking up the new homes. We are seeing the older homes selling, but we're not seeing anything moving in new neighborhoods. And to respond to this, staff believes that if we can open up our land use bylaw and we can allow secondary suites to exist in neighborhoods like Wildflower Phase 4, we should see more of these lots moving and drawing people into Strathmore and kind of maintaining the town's population moving forward. In terms of public consultation and engagement, the first step of the engagement process here, the developer or the applicant reached out to the homeowners association and just said, hey, we're thinking of submitting this application to the town. Here's a heads up. The town then followed that communication with a written letter that we sent out to residents within a 50-meter radius of the subject lands. I'd just like to note that that 50-meter radius is town policy, so that's what we do for every application that we receive. That's standard. Following that letter, we received 8 written concerns, which I believe are attached as attachment 3 to your reports. The town then forwarded those not the responses, but the town advised the developer that we had received those responses, and the developer responded by creating a frequently asked questions document that they disseminated to the HOA to try to alleviate those concerns. Following that, the town actually held an engagement event with the homeowners association and 2 representatives representing the residents of Wildflower here in the town office. Staff believes this engagement event was quite positive. We spoke about the concerns of the neighborhood, and we tried to work out a solution that would achieve results that, I guess, alleviated their concerns. Staff believes that the concerns were reflected in the bylaw that's attached, so most of the concerns, which we'll get to on the next slide, had to do with parking, and staff believes that we have achieved those concerns in the bylaw. Following this engagement event, we then advertised in the Strathmore Times for 2 consecutive weeks, and that was in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. And then following that, we had the HOA come back in about a week before the public hearing just to make sure that everyone was on the same track and that communication was open and transparent. So after we received those 8 written concerns, and as well as the petition, there was kind of a trend to the concerns amongst all the 8 responses. The first of which was the increase in density. If you recall on the second or third slide, we aren't actually increasing the density of the units in this neighborhood. We're just allowing a legal suite to exist in the basement. So right now, any homeowner in Strathmore can rent their basement bedrooms out without a legal suite or not. It's just, you can do that, and you can have a house full of 10 people. So we aren't actually adding any livable space to these dwellings, so we aren't actually increasing that density. In terms of parking spillover, there was concern that the vehicles in the driveway would then be parked on the street, and that is a valid concern. All these concerns are valid, and staff believes that we've dealt with this by requiring that all development permit applications proposing a secondary suite will have to show that the parking for the unit can be managed on site. So when an applicant submits an application for a secondary suite, they have to show that there's enough space, and if the space isn't there, then the application will likely be refused. In terms of curb appeal, the curb appeal of Wildflower Phase 4 dwellings won't change at all, so there won't be any flashing neon lights outside saying this is a suite. It's just going to look exactly the same as the Wildflower Phase 3 dwellings. Again, property values, we did our own research here, and we believe it will actually have a positive effect on property value. And lastly, maintenance and noise. The town has a community standards bylaw, and we intend to use it if there are maintenance and noise issues. The town has various fines and municipal enforcement mechanisms, and we have a strong relationship with our municipal enforcement team. We have weekly meetings, and if there are concerns with secondary suites, those will be dealt with swiftly. So to conclude, staff is recommending that council give the bylaw second and third reading this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Is there anyone present who supports the bylaw who wishes to speak now? And if you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone and just introduce yourself, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Heather Zavislake, and I am the newly appointed Development Manager for Wildflower Ranch. I am here tonight to speak briefly on the Secondary Suites Initiative as an additional choice for an affordable, legal, and safe rental housing option here in Strathmore. I apologize if I have some overlap listening to Cameron. There's a little duplication, but I'll move it along. We can all agree that the housing starts at 10 are down significantly. The economy and the job market are not helping us either, and there is an ever-increasing demand on families to be able to either maintain their current living arrangements or find living arrangements, places where they can live or where they can afford to live. Secondary suites give folks that option. For a potential homeowner, the suite is a mortgage helper, as Cameron said, and maybe just the added income booster they need to qualify for owning their own home. For the tenants of a secondary suite, it will provide housing in a new environment that is legal, safe, secure, and allow them to maintain their privacy and their independence. Presently, people can rent their homes, and this also means renting potentially illegal basement suites, simply to make ends meet. In many instances, these don't comply with current building codes and are unsafe for homeowners, tenants, neighbors, and the neighborhood. The legal secondary suite approach helps to eliminate that worry. All secondary suites, as we know, will meet all Alberta Safety Code requirements and be fully registered and on the town's radar. We have been invested in this community since 2005, both with a physical and financial presence, and want to ensure that we continue to be forward-thinking, keeping up with the needs and demands of the public by providing a product that is in alignment with the future vision of Strathmore. From a developer's viewpoint, there is demand. A good example are the new builds in Harmony, a community just outside of Calgary next to the Springbank Airport, where they are doing secondary suites above the garages. Our Phase 4 lots are currently owned by our affiliated builders. This direct control special zoning change will simply allow a prospective customer the option to apply for a legal, code-abiding suite. From a builder's perspective, they want this ability to present options to potential purchasers and are fully in support of this initiative. From the WFR residents' point of view, of course I cannot speak for them, but I did have a chance to introduce myself and chat briefly with the HOA president yesterday. He was pleased with the inclusiveness shown by the town and the work that had been done to date with the various groups and meetings that had been held pre-me, and felt that the concerns of the residents had been heard and were being addressed. Going forward, I undertook to him to provide open, transparent communications so that we all focus our efforts on a plan that works for everyone. As Cameron said, our lot sizes and housing styles in Phase 4 will not change. They will remain as per the registered plan of subdivision. The parking, we believe, has been adequately addressed with the strict requirements being written into the conditions of the development permit. The homeowners with secondary suites will want to attract the best tenants, and I suspect would ensure that their yards are kept up and aesthetically pleasing. But like any other residents in Strathmore, secondary suite or not, the town can enforce violations. I understand change, and things that are new scare people. It's human nature. Many here remember how fearful people were when changing the 50-foot standard and going to smaller lots. That change has allowed for many of our WFR residents to move into a new home, which they may not have been able to do under the old bylaw. We are in no way looking to implement ideas to the detriment of the town or WFR residents. And in fact, we feel that this is an extremely positive step toward improving the community and making Strathmore an even more attractive place to live. Allowing people the opportunity at a fair shot of home ownership and giving people flexible, legal, and safe housing, that's an option and a choice. I thank you for your time. And I do have copies of my presentation if anybody would like them.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who supports the bylaw and would wish to speak? Is there anyone present who opposes the bylaw and wishes to speak at this time? Is there anyone present deemed to be affected by the bylaw who now wishes to speak? Do councillors have any further questions? And does council feel they have all the information they need to make a decision? Okay, thank you. Then I hereby declare this public hearing for bylaw number 19-14 closed at 8:40 p.m. and we'll take a motion to close.
I so move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And for those of you who are in the audience or at home again, we have closed the public hearing. We will come back to deal with that very early in the public meeting that we go back into. So at this time, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of council for November 6, 2019. And at this time, I'm looking to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any councillors that they need to bring up tonight? Nothing? Administration?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have no additions, but we do but, sorry, we have one deletion. We have item 3.1, in-camera item pertaining to FOIP Section 24. We'll delete that one. Also, we have an amendment to the agenda we'd like to make, and that is to move both bylaws, Bylaw 1916 and Bylaw 1914, or sorry, just Bylaw 1914, to item just before the, just before number 4. And then we also have one addition, and that will be under item 9.6, Memorandum of Understanding between Siksika Nation and Town of Strathmore.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery.
Oh, and should we be changing those agenda item numbers for 7.1 and 7.2? No?
Okay.
You have to turn your mic off.
Oh, sorry.
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I'm not clear in regards to the reason for changing the numbers.
Just that in the agenda table of contents, the minutes are labeled as 7.1 and 7.2, and the actual agenda item is 5.1 and 5.2. There's two 5.1 and 5.2.
Thank you, Your Worship, I understand. Yes, we can change the item numbers as well.
And I'll move the agenda as amended.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Which brings us to the item dealing with bylaw number 19-14, which deals with secondary housing, Wildflower Phase 4. Do we need to have anything brought up from administration anymore? Everything's been heard, Council. You are comfortable with what you've heard in the public hearing, I believe? I would. Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that council give second reading to bylaw number 19-14.
Thank you. And now that we have a motion for second reading, is there any discussion on the motion? Further questions or comments? Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to echo the presentation by administration with regards to the great amount of difficulty this community faces in terms of affordable housing. And I echo those sentiments. And also in terms of economy, that secondary suites for owners are a tremendous way for people to actively enter into the economy. And so I'm very appreciative of this, and I am fully in support of it, Your Worship.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Sobel?
Just very quickly, and in addition, for me, the biggest point of this was that these secondary suites were going to be done legally. This is a safety issue, a health issue, and these illegal safety suites are, I know for a fact, all over the place, especially in the city. And best way to deal with them, in my opinion anyway, is to legislate them.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Your Worship, I'm ready for third reading. To call the motion.
Call the question.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Any other councillors had any comments? I think I just wanted to echo Councillor Sobel's comment. I think what this does is it gives the town some real control over what could be allowed in certain housing situations, and you could have secondary suites developing on their own that aren't legal, and this does give a lot of control over what could be there and improve that situation. So I will call the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Councillor Bauer, sorry.
I move that council give third reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 19-14, being a bylaw to redesignate 24 properties from R1N to DC.
Thank you, and you've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Councillor Peterson? And this brings us to presentations and recognitions, item 4.1, the HEAL Committee, Choose Well, and I believe we have Mr. Robert Brettweiser coming forward to talk about this. Thank you and welcome, Robert.
You're very welcome. Your Worship, honorable councilors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be here again. It's been a number of years in a row that I have been able to represent the town of Strathmore on Choose Well as the Choose Well champion. Every year we are invited to make an application for an award. And I wanted to read to you some of the summary account of the statements that I put in for the award, if you'll bear with me. In late 2015, HEAL was invited to participate in the Alberta Health Services Success Cancer Study. We accepted the challenge and embarked on a 3-year journey of study, collecting information, and promoting cancer preventive initiatives. On the basis of information collected, which involves sectors from school, healthcare, community at large, community facilities, and organization sector and work site, we determined several areas that we need to address as cancer prevention measures. After careful consideration and research, our coalition focused on 3 areas of concern, and we began initiatives to address the areas identified: food security, sun protection, and physical activity. Food security. HEAL has partnered with Strathmore Communities in Bloom to promote and enhance gardening initiatives in 2 schools with students from kindergarten through grade 9. The Strathmore High School shop and students built a total of 5 4x8 garden boxes, 3 of which have been installed in one schoolyard and another 2 in July in the George Freeman School. The George Freeman School has also purchased a tower garden system and are growing greens and herbs to harvest in June. Along with the physical garden boxes and plots, teaching is done by one HEAL member, that's myself, to grades kindergarten through grade 3 on food security, sunscreen protection, and composting. Our coalition has provided the school's gardening handbooks and sample sunscreen for each student. There has been good support by local businesses who have provided on-site services and products for the gardens, as well as financial grants to cover all costs. And I must say, the garden at the Wheatland Elementary School, we collected $3,400 in grants and $3,000 in grants for the George Freeman School. Promotional initiatives have drawn attention to these schools' gardens, and now other schools and local community groups are showing an interest in duplicating our projects. The Golden Hills School Division and the school parent councils have been supportive of these initiatives. The sign at the garden at the Wheatland Elementary School reads like this: "Our learning community will be able to experience hands-on gardening, developing skills in planning, planting, and harvesting. It will help us to know where our food comes from and how that knowledge can impact food security in a positive way. This project will encourage responsibility and teamwork for all who are involved. It will also demonstrate how garden waste is turned into compost," another Wheatland Elementary School initiative. Several other community groups, Communities in Bloom and Backyard Bounty, are focusing on food security. For the last 3 years, Communities in Bloom planted the birth forest with edible fruit trees berry bushes, and grapevines. Backyard Bounty, a program to encourage sharing of garden produce and fruit with the public, was also started. Sharing of raspberry cuttings and extra seeds is also facilitated by their Facebook account. Sun protection, that was one of our other initiatives in the cancer study. Our coalition identified sun protection for cancer prevention to be a high priority for our community. We have partnered with the town of Strathmore and our local library to provide sunscreen dispensers, which can be loaned out for sporting events and other public gatherings at no cost. Our coalition is providing the sunscreen free of charge. We have arranged to sustain the product through financial support. Education pieces will also be available to users of the sunscreen dispenser. Sample sunscreen has been provided to school garden groups and to participants at our annual Get to Know Your Neighbor Festival. Teaching opportunities at the schools with gardens has provided us with opportunities to encourage proper clothing, hydration, and sunscreen protection for gardeners. Our third initiative was physical activities. Since HEAL was founded, one of our primary focuses has been to get people walking for their health. We have partnered with the town of Strathmore to build and maintain pathways and sidewalks that connect with the downtown, schools, and parks. In order to encourage walking on the more than 50-kilometer trails and pathways, HEAL, in partnership with the town of Strathmore and local businesses, have designed and installed over 40 wayfinding signs and 10 maps to help people find their way around the community and to encourage walking, biking, running, and wheeling. In the newly redeveloped downtown core, the town has erected bicycle racks and places to tie their dogs. There are also numerous places where one can rest, either on a patio, picnic table, or bench. It is our desire to encourage people to leave their cars at home and walk and bike to the core of the community. An example of town council support is a June 11th Walk with the Council through part of the pathway system where the wayfinding signs have been erected. It was the launch of the Wayfinding Sign Initiative. Another major improvement in our community is the new field house, which is a three-way partnership between town, Golden Hills School Division, and Wheatland County. A new elementary school is attached to the field house so that it is a shared facility. It encompasses playing surfaces for volleyball, indoor soccer, basketball, lacrosse, and other sport activities, and has an elevated walking track. The addition of this facility has enhanced our capacity for all year-round walking and other sports activities. Our HEAL Coalition has been involved in advocacy and planning for this facility, and this has allowed us to expand our capacity from a 2-day-a-week walking program to a full-time, anytime walking. One success story was that a separate affordable walking track fee of only $2 was adopted for this facility. A scan of other facilities showed higher usage rates with lower or no fees, and our coalition lobbied to be sure this walking track was used. This was my application on behalf of the town of Strathmore to Choose Well, and as a result of that, we were awarded an award, which I would like to present to the town and to you, Mayor. The award is called Creating Supportive Environments, awarded to Heal Our Future by Choose Well Communities. I should like to also mention that my wife and I were invited to go to Lake Louise for a lovely 2-day trip with all expenses paid. We were treated royally while we were there. And I also had an opportunity to take in a high five training program, which I think you're all familiar with. It was called Principles of Healthy Aging. And this was supposed to be for elder people to remain active and healthy. And as an 80-year-old, I think I probably could have taught the course. But I did pick up quite a few hints and ideas which I can use here in the community and in the residence where most of the people are elderly. So thank you for your support, Town of Strathmore, Mayor and Council and Administration. We really appreciate how you have come on board with us to make all these things happy. And I'm happy to represent the Town of Strathmore as the Choose Well champion.
Thank you, Robert. I believe Councillor Peterson has a question.
I do. Mr. Breitweiser, you had an unfortunate incident with some vandalism earlier this year.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to know if you were able to recover from that. And
I was able to recover.
you were able to recover, yeah.
The garden wasn't.
No.
But I can tell you this, there are quite a few eyes around the community. And people would call me on the phone and say, people from Sagewood, they look out the window there on the garden, and they would say, you need to come right away. Somebody's pulling out carrots in the garden. Well, by the time you get there, they're gone. But one day, Rob Peary was driving past, and he happens to have one of the garden boxes in his chair of Communities in Bloom. And he saw 3 children pulling out carrots and walking away with them. And so he stopped and talked with them and made it a teachable moment. And he asked them where they're going. Oh, we're taking these home. Well, and then he talked about who owned the garden boxes, who was responsible, who was allowed to take produce from there, and that what they were doing was stealing. So he said, I'm going to go home with you and talk to your parents. And the one little boy says, please don't do that. I'm already grounded. So we're hopeful that gets around the community, and maybe the issue has been resolved. We don't know.
I wanted to speak to you, just briefly in terms of some of us here have children, grandchildren, teach at Wheatland Elementary, and are very familiar with the garden program that you've initiated and been so faithful to. And I can tell you from personal family experience, when my grandchildren found out what was happening, their response was this great concern that food security in our community had been jeopardized. And all I could think about was food security, that term coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth, is the most valuable thing I could ever imagine in terms of the teaching that this program has offered. And I've been privileged to sit around the table sometimes with Heel, and I'm full of admiration and gratitude for what you've accomplished so quietly, unobtrusively, and incredibly effectively in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Peterson's comments and also just thank you personally for all your work in the community. I know that this community benefits greatly from your efforts, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's actually got me walking. Usually Councillor Peterson shames me into a lot of walks, but you've inspired me as well. Councillor Peterson is also going to turn on me and get angry, but I'm not going up by myself because I think this council has really worked well together with groups like HEAL to promote the idea of walkability in the town. So I'd like everybody to come up, and I think we'll give you a little more time because you need to hobble up. Deputy Mayor Corbeil is in a boot cast, but she'll be good. So, sorry, Councillor Peterson. Oh, yeah.
Tyler will take your picture.
We'll get you guys to squish in just a little. There you go. Yeah, nice and comfy. Right, 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. And do the close up one as well. 1, 2. I want to give you a award. Thank you guys. Appreciate that.
Jennifer, I think we have a point of privilege coming because a couple of our counselors are really cold.
Only on that half, though.
So they're wondering about the heat in this room. You're
Your
hot.
worship, I do have blankets in the.
I have an electric heater too, and I have a blanket from First Nations from Siksika that we could use too. They've been very good to us. Thank you. So we'll move on to delegations, 5.1 Strathmore Municipal Library update. And we'd like to welcome you tonight. We apologize and we appreciate your patience because you landed on a night where there were two public hearings. So we have tonight Ms. Miranda Johnson and Mr. Jeff Ballback, who are going to be providing council with an update on the goings-on at Strathmore Municipal Library, which I think most of us follow on Facebook as well. But thank you for being here tonight. Councillor Montgomery, did you want to just weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize to Jeff and Miranda. I told Miranda, oh yeah, come at 7, you know, like, yeah. So I'm really sorry.
And what time is it now? 9:03.
2 hours.
It was good. Yeah.
Well, welcome tonight, and we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you. Council, Your Worship, thanks for having us here tonight. My name's Jeff Ball, Chair of the Town of Strathmore Library Board. I'm here with our interim Director of Library Services, Miranda Johnson. We're here tonight to talk to you. I do believe most of you know about this, but to formally present to you about the Community Adult Learning Program grant that we received from the Government of Alberta. So I'll give it over to Miranda.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff. So 1 in 5 Albertans aged 16 and older struggle to understand and use information from books, news stories, and instruction manuals. So these individuals are the same as you and me. They have goals, dreams, interests, and 20% are struggling and get left behind. So limiting their ability to contribute to our economy, support family development, and lead a quality, fulfilled life. So to help combat this startling fact, Strathmore Municipal Library applied for and was awarded a $200,000 project-based grant, which is $100,000 per year, and we're on probation for these 2 years of $200,000. And then once we pass, which we are very confident we're going to, this will be an ongoing grant. The grant is sponsored by the Alberta Advanced Education, the Department of Indigenous and Community Connections. So we received this grant in August. The library received the Community Adult Learning Program grant through a strong application, which advocated for our mission to encourage lifelong learning, featured our expertise in literacy and learning, and highlighted our commitment to responsive and active community development and partnership. After engaging in a community needs assessment process, which we'll be starting, we'll be creating a literacy services strategy, which will support learners to build foundational literacy and learning skills. Including those skills identified by the Government of Canada's Essential Skills Framework. This approach is in alignment with the CALP vision as changing lives through adult foundational learning in connected communities. Through monies in this grant, we have hired, and we're very excited about this, a full-time literacy services coordinator who has since relocated to Strathmore and is very excited about that. Yay! And in addition, we were able to internally promote a staff member to another full-time position as a facility supervisor to support the increase in operations that will come with this addition to our service. And some of our legacy programming will be moved under the CALP umbrella. But before we continue, you may find yourself wondering, well, what is kelp? And no, it's not a plant from the ocean. That's our little joke for the night. And we'd like to show you this video. Click in. Double click. click this slide. Oh. No, it's not. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Welcome to the Community Adult Learning Program, a network of organizations supporting adult learners in communities all across Alberta. You are now part of this incredible network of individuals and communities that make our system strong. The Community Adult Learning Program works to ensure that adult Albertans can access the foundational learning they need to live full and successful lives. And the best way to do that is to create vibrant and connected learning communities where adults can build foundational learning skills. Our organizations focus on providing programs and services to increase adult learners' skills in literacy, numeracy, English language learning, basic computer skills, and foundational life skills. Whether delivered through a classroom setting, tutoring, online, or a group setting using the principles of family literacy, these programs truly aim to transform lives. Adult foundational learners have strengths, weaknesses, interests, goals, and dreams just like all of us. They are looking for a way to improve their lives. And while they may not know exactly what skills they need to do that, their local CALP just might be the best place to start. Building on an individual's foundational skills can have a great impact on their ability to learn, on their health status and participation in society, and on their ability to access employment. And that's why community adult learning programs are so important. They serve as points of entry for learning in our communities by creating safe and welcoming learning environments for all types of learners. When learners feel comfortable within a well-connected network, finding their way to the services and supports they need is so much easier. Our aim is to ensure that any door is the right door for every learner.
Strathmore Municipal Library will develop and amalgamate adult literacy services to serve foundational learners in the town of Strathmore, Wheatland County, and the Siksika Nation communities. This service will include one-on-one and small group tutoring, library programming that aligns with the 7 programming areas in CALP, as well as community capacity building learning opportunities. And we plan to work collaboratively with library partners in this pursuit. We will engage learners with special initiatives and events such as an all-age, all-stage summer reading and learning initiative. We will have ESL conversation circles, develop new and culturally inclusive library collections to support foundational learners, and provide free library cards and exam proctoring for learners, which we are required to do by CALP. This grant is highly structured with specific budget categories and reporting. The budget is split into 5 categories: operations, which includes salaries of the 2 people I outlined earlier, program delivery, professional development, and training, which we are super excited about, participant support, and furniture, fixture, and equipment. And any transfer between the different categories, we have to actually have government approval for. So the library will seek to provide concurrent library programming that engages both children and adults. That way, adults can focus on learning objectives in programming and in tutoring. Public libraries are built on the adult learning principles of Malcolm Knowles through the facilitation of relevant programs and services for self-directed and internally motivated adults, bolstered by practical life experiences, expedited in a relaxed, respectful, and accessible environment. The Strathmore Municipal Library serves the unique and individual learning needs of a large, diverse population base, and as such is in an ideal position to further engage and support adult literacy and foundational learning to create thriving, healthy, literate communities, which I'm sure you all agree with. The objectives and outcomes from our project and development of the Strathmore Library Literacy Services Strategy will be to support adults to build skills and increase literacy, As outlined from what I talked about earlier, the Government of Canada's Essential Skills Framework in the following areas: reading, writing, document use, numeracy, digital skills, thinking, oral communication, and working with others. The CALP initiative is a natural fit for the library, joining with other library operating CALP such as Lethbridge Public Library, Calgary Public Library, and Devon Public Library. CALP is a large network that also includes organizations such as Pincher Creek Community Adult Learning Council Society and Mountain View County's Adult Learning Society. We wanted to just outline a success story from the program from Lethbridge Public Library. It's a very compelling story and shows the impact this kind of programming can have. So this is the story of Sam Mathin, a Sudanese lost boy who was at first a child soldier and then a refugee and finally a Canadian immigrant. He moved to Brooks where he found a community of Sudanese and got a good job in a meatpacking plant. He quickly learned to speak English and earned a promotion to supervisor. Unfortunately, Sam, now in his late 20s, was unable to read or write. So Sam made the very brave decision to quit his job and finally pursue his desired education. Sam was admitted to Lethbridge College's ESL program. Because of his struggle with reading and writing, he was referred to Lethbridge Public Library's CALP program called Read On. Read On has been a part of Sam's amazing learning journey. And Sam obtained his grade 12 diploma 7 years after entering the ESL program. Sam credits his success to his one-on-one tutor, and these are his own words. When I came to Read On, I had nothing. I needed my ABCs and my 1, 2, 3s, and you guys were there. More than willing to help me in any way you could. You gave me a very good tutor who showed lots of patience in teaching a grown man how to read. My tutor became my friend. Sam then applied for and was accepted to the psychology and sociology program at Lethbridge College. Now that he could read and write in English, he volunteered for Lethbridge Family Services as a translator to help other immigrants, returning as needed to get further help through the Read On program. In Sam's words, I never quit once. I set myself the goal of getting an education, and as being in a big class was not helpful to me, I needed one-on-one support, and I got it here at the library through Read On. If you want to be successful in the community, you need only go to the library to get the help that you need. One day I would like to work with the United Nations. I also think in the future I might get into politics. On June 1st of this year, Sam graduated from the University of Calgary with a social work degree. This was all possible because of access to literacy and learning supports. Literacy is critical to the economic development of a community. Individuals who are educated are more likely to earn more, to volunteer more, and engage more in community activities. A 2004, which is a little bit dated, but I think it's a good illustration, Statistics Canada study concluded that 1% increase in literacy levels would raise Canada's labor productivity by 2.5%, and add an estimated $32 billion to our annual gross domestic product. Our CALP initiative will provide persons in our Strathmore community with focused skills training, from literacy to numeracy to proficiency with English, and the ability to engage with technology. Foundational life skills are key for people to participate in society, pursue learning like Sam, and be successful at work. We are also striving towards working relationship with other community groups and potentially the Siksika Nation. The Community Learning Program is aimed at ensuring that all citizens can access learning supports. Ultimately, the goal is for every citizen in Strathmore to have the tools to thrive and to reach their full potential. With our community-wide needs assessment, we will determine local gaps in adult literacy which could be bridged by our program. We are planning a big kickoff event. I'll hope you all come on Family Literacy Day, which is January 27th, 2020. Thank you for continuing to support literacy development in our community. Together in partnership with Strathmore Municipal Library, we can make Strathmore a strong, dynamic, literate community. And we'd like to end our presentation by acknowledging the ongoing financial, in-kind encouragement and other supports we receive from the town of Strathmore. I'd like to say that Jason Montgomery painted our area. That's going to be on Kelp area, so thank you to him. And Mark, who's in the back here, supported us by doing some work as well. Without this solid base of support and encouragement, we could not attempt this type of life and community changing initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Jeff, were you also going to say a few words?
No, Miranda says it best.
Okay, thank you. Well, congratulations on receiving the KELP grant. Are there any questions or comments from council? I think Deputy Mayor Corbeil, you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Congratulations on receiving this. This is huge, and I think it will only benefit our community. I have a question, though. So with the amount of money and whatever you get, how many do you think you can actually put through this program? Or how many do you expect to be able to put through to it anyway?
We don't have a number, and we're not actually expected to do any more than one.
Okay.
But certainly if we could have a whole group of SAMs,
Yeah.
that would be tremendous. I mean, that's just like life-changing, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much for coming in. I have nothing but good things to say about you, Jeff, as the chair of the library board. And Miranda, you've been excellent for this community. You've done a great job with the library, so thank you very much. And thank you for bringing this news about this grant. And I actually believe in this community that there are some, let's say, issues with education in some areas. And there are adults that don't have full educations, and I think that this will be a big benefit to people in our area, especially like newly arrived immigrants and whatnot. They'll be able to benefit from this greatly, so I'm very excited, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Miranda and Jeff, for coming today. I know that we were really pushing you to do this because we really wanted council to be able to share in the excitement of what you're doing in the over there in the library. Sometimes we feel like they're kind of separate and we don't get to hear about the good things that you're doing. So thank you, Miranda, for taking it upon yourself to go through that grant process. I know that it's a huge undertaking, that you took your own personal time to do it, and you did it on a weekend. And I just want to congratulate you for being a successful applicant. You've shown us that this program can change lives, and I look forward to you coming back to us with some success stories and telling us what impact you have been able to have on our community. So thank you for everything you do.
Through the chair, you are welcome. It's an honor, and I've had so much support from the town of Strathmore. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you very much. I also echo my fellow councillors. I had a question. Did you receive letters of support from Siksika when you were applying for your grant?
No, we did not. We would really like to work on creating very good relationship with them and support them with this grant in a way that's helpful to them.
I urge this with extraordinary passion, and I hope and pray that we didn't get the KELP grant in exception to them not getting it in terms of adult education and literacy going forward. So it is of critical need that we reach out to Siksika and make sure that we haven't compromised our relationship.
Through the chair, I'm not aware that we have, and we are highly motivated to work with them and to support them in a way that is helpful to them. So that will be part of our strategy.
Thank you. And so in terms of this, I know that a major barrier. So you said for every citizen in Strathmore, but at the beginning, did I hear you talk about Wheatland County as well, or is this just germane to Strathmore?
This would be Wheatland County.
Wheatland County as well.
And
Good.
Siksika Nation.
And I think that's wonderful because we do have lots of second language persons working in our rural community. So I think that's another big area of access. And another great barrier for, particularly for young adults in Siksika, is access to training for Class 7 driver's license. I see that's part of your portfolio. But an even greater barrier for them is transportation into a community that has access to the CALP grant. So,
Through the chair, we will be looking at that. Certainly participant supports and in terms of transportation will be part of our strategy.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. And I'm wondering if I can follow up on that, if it would be appropriate to steer the municipal library group and board to the Siksika Social Services offices and see if they can get in touch with residents who might need some of these helps and aids as far as reading and numeracy. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Worship. We're really fortunate to have the support of Linda Bernicki, who's here tonight, who has established a really trusting relationship. And the best area to probably connect with in terms of Siksika is there's employment program. So there's SET, what they call SET, Student Employment and Training, and their also their family services. And the third one, of course, would be their post-secondary education.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any other comments from council? Once again, thank you for your presentation and congratulations on winning that CALP grant. And I've always been one of your followers on my Facebook page. I try to share a lot of the things that you guys are doing. So congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Montgomery, did you want to make your motion? Or is it a little early, 2 minutes early?
No, I'll do it. Why not? I'll move we extend the meeting until 10:30.
Thank you. You've all heard that exciting motion. All in favor? The motion is carried. We can go as long as 10:30. Ooh. Item 5.2, new blood presentation. Ms. Sawatsky, are you speaking to this, or is?
Your Worship, I don't think that the delegation is here this evening, but I do think that Councillor Bauer was going to speak to this item.
Okay. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Watsky. So the director of the drama program at Strathmore High School, Deanne Birch, has approached me and asked me whether or not council would be amenable to come to a presentation of New Blood on Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. And the dance theater performance is starting at 7 p.m. It's expected to go about an hour and 15 minutes maximum. And the reason that they would like us there is they are taking this presentation to Ottawa. They have plans to take it to Ottawa, and they would like, I believe, a letter of support from the town to accompany that application. So Deanne was planning on coming today. I am thinking, because the delegation is not here, that they've encountered some type of problem, and I will reach out to her tomorrow and ask whether or not they will be able to come at our committee of the whole meeting next week. And I would like to just have this recommendation on the table, and I would move it as a motion next week. Well, yes, I would move it as a motion if they are indeed inviting us next week at committee of the whole. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And so everybody's aware that we would switch then the November 20th meeting and make it become the 27th? So we'll look forward to your motion coming to us next week. That brings us to Jen Sawatsky.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's probably best, Your Worship, if council made a motion to refer this matter to the committee of the whole meeting next week.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bauer?
I move to refer this motion to the committee, pardon me.
Your Worship, you would be referring the item to the committee of the whole agenda, not the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Watsky. I refer the item to the committee of the whole for the November, is it the 13th next week? 13th meeting, the committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you for your motion, Councillor Bauer. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Which brings us to item 6, consent agenda. Nothing there, Jen? Thank you. Item 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for October 16th, 2019.
Your worship, I would move the regular council meeting minutes of October 16th, 2019.
Thank you very much for that motion. You've all heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And we have passed that motion. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Oh.
Sorry?
No.
Councillor Cox?
I move that council adopt the October 16, 2019 organizational meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. I don't think we have any tabled items, which brings us to item 9, 9.1, items from administration, Family Violence Prevention Month proclamation, which is found on page 19. And Linda Bernicki, you've been a very patient lady too, so welcome tonight.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm here tonight to recommend that Council proclaim November as Family Violence Prevention Month.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments from council for Linda? Seeing none. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Move the council proclaim November 2019 as Family Violence Prevention Month in Strathmore.
Thank you very much for the motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, Linda. And you're staying for the Child, Youth, and Family Hub Financial Report, which is found on page 24.
At Council's request, you have before you the budget and actuals for 2017, 2018, and to September 2019. And I'm prepared to answer any questions and take any comments.
Thank you very much, Linda. Councillor Montgomery.
I just had a question about the revenue with regards to programming fees versus other revenue. The programming fees are quite low, obviously, but then the other revenue is quite high. Are they just kind of intermingled or something?
The program revenue, the program fee revenue and other revenue are two separate. So other revenue would be items such as donations, grants, the United Way grant, donations from the Smile Cookie campaign, donations that public at large provide, and program revenue and program fee revenues are specific to the costs that a participant pays to participate.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like you budgeted $85,000 for the programming fees, and then the actual is $1,000, and then versus the $25,000. So I'm just wondering, I guess, why there's the difference in the budgeted versus actual.
Your Worship, if I may, I can speak to that. We're having problems integrating two different systems from the system we use at the hub and the system we use here at the town, Diamond, and so it's just a GL coding error, and so they're just going into the wrong space. But the majority of the other revenue is program fee revenue.
Okay.
Is program fee revenue. It's not showing up in the right line, and we are working to address that.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was wondering. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that's under which one?
So the other revenue, the 77,725 to date actuals for 2019 is program fee revenue. And our other contributions, as Linda indicated, are actually going into program fee revenue.
Oh, okay.
And we're working to fix that so they go back to where they should be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Linda. Thank you for your report and all the hard work, and I realize it was probably a lot of work. My thing going forward is, what are we doing at the hub to save costs?
Thank you for your question. So we're doing a few things. So one of the things we have done is we've We're almost completed doing a complete review of all the programs and services to see where we can increase efficiencies. And so one of the ways that we've found for that right now, what we're doing is we only have one full-time person with full benefits, and the remainder of the staff are part-time or casual, versus having more than one full-time staff. So we're really looking at some efficiencies with that, and long-term what that would be for the benefit financially and also for programs and services. We've one of the huge things that we've been able to progress with is any subsidies that families are getting that they can't afford the full price. Those subsidies are no longer coming from tax dollars. They're coming from donations from the United Way or the Smile Cookie Campaign, or people who would like to sponsor a child or a youth in a program. And then in addition to that, we've really expanded our partnerships. And so with our partnerships, we've been able to bring in different facilitators at no cost to be able to enhance program services to a different degree. So instead of like perhaps paying a program facilitator to come in and pay them $500 for one program, we've developed relationships where they've come in and they're offering that for free instead of charging us. And so that's a great example, because we might still charge like $2 or $3 for the program because we're providing food or snacks or something, but that overall cost is way down. And we have a new model that we're doing in reviewing the programs, and so we're looking at everything across the board and seeing what kind of outcomes we're getting from them so we can continue to build efficiencies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Worship. So I just had a couple questions, and before we start, I just wanted to say that, you know, as bad as this looks in terms of the red numbers, it looks so much better than what it once did. So I really appreciate the hard work that's gone into this tremendously. So first, in the 2018 actual, the 93,000 in bad debt, can you just remind me what that was?
Your Worship, the bad debt is with respect to the transitioning all the programs and staff over to the town of Strathmore and looking at new programs and stuff. And also what was happening is there was a lot of outstanding families that hadn't paid for their programs, for their program services. And so what we were doing is we were able to get a large portion of those paid, but a portion of them was not paid, and so the rest had to go to bad debt.
So that
because we just weren't able to collect the fees from those residents.
Thank you. And then my second question is with regards to the 2019 budgeted amount. So this actual took us to the end of last month, or to the end of September rather. Do you anticipate that you'll be pretty much on that amount that sits there, that 287,000?
Your Worship,
terms of
yes. Yes, we're expected to hopefully even come underneath that this year because of some of the efficiencies that we've been able to have, and also with the huge change in our staffing model, we feel that we're going to be able to come not only within that, but we're going to come in under budget is what our hope is.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Linda, so much for this report, because it really does give us councillors a really better understanding of how you have really taken this responsibility of being fiscally responsible with the hub to heart. And we know that, under Tracy's direction, that this is something that is felt by the whole entire department. But at the same time, you're still having fun. And you're paying your employees, and you're getting things done there, and you're still servicing the community. But from the way that we can see the numbers going down, you're doing it in a very fiscally responsible way. I do want to just say that there are a couple things that stand out, and the other councillors have talked about that. But with regards to contracted services, and other purchases. I'm just finding that a little bit ambiguous, that's at 45,000 right now, or 47,551, and I would just like you to speak to that and let me know a little bit more in depth what that really means, please.
So the contracted services are at the level that they're at because as we, as the board transitioned out, there was buses to be purchased and there was a delay for a lot of reasons to do with insurance and processing and how it was going to work underneath the town owning buses. So during that time, we had to rent buses to pick kids up after school and take them to other activities that we were providing. And then once everything was finalized with the buses, there was one of the buses that needed some repairs, and so that is also in there. In addition to that, we had a contracted staff person and their contract was GL'd underneath contracted services, where it probably should have been underneath the staffing, but it was GL'd there, and also. There's a few things that were GL'd incorrectly because we were trying to figure out where to GL them. And sometimes when we don't know where to GL things, they get put underneath other purchases or other contracted services, so the bills can get paid and it can be moved on. And so we're working to kind of really streamline that and see a more concise of what those mean.
And so do you currently own the bus?
The town currently owns the bus, yes.
The town has taken on the
Yes.
bus ownership. Oh, good. Well, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bauer. Any other comments or questions for Linda? I echo all those things. Thank you for all the work you've done, and Tracy and you and your staff. And I've seen the care firsthand that you have for people in the community, so it's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Item 9.3, is there anything else? Councillor
I move
Sobel,
to
thank you.
Accept this report for information, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sobel. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried. And that brings us to Community Improvement Program Policy, and Mark Pretzlaff, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Thank you, Worship Council. I'm here to speak tonight to the new CIF program that we've entitled as the Community Investment Program. The CIF program began here in Strathmore in 2016, and from that time on, we've seen some significant usage of it. We've had a number of organizations that have applied several times, and the funds have been depleted on an annual basis since 2018, mostly just because of the success of the program and people recognizing that this is a great opportunity for them to provide some additional support for their programs and as such. In July, we presented here some options to council based on our research of other communities and other municipalities that offered very similar programs. And what we're presenting to you today in this policy is the new stream, is the new CIP program that recognizes the 5 different streams that we would looking to support Strathmore and community. The first stream talks about recreational and cultural events. And the purpose of this stream is to assist with the cost of cultural, recreation, culture, and other programs and events that provide the community provided to community residents. The second one is minor capital projects, and assists with capital projects associated with the conservation, development, and/or enhancement of programs and services delivered to the community by community associations. The third stream is community programs, and it's to assist in offsetting organizational expenses incurred in the operation of programs designed to support community associations looking to offer programs that demonstrate a need. The fourth stream already exists, but it would funnel people towards the family and social programs, and that would assist with events and programs that align directly with family and community sports services, FCSS mandate. And the fifth stream would be economic development initiatives, These ones are to assist with opportunities to improve the economic well-being and quality of life for the town, for people in the town of Strathmore. It is our goal that this policy would go into effect effective January 1st, and that we'd have 3 intakes for the 3 streams, recreation, culture, minor cap, and community programs, with intakes beginning in March 30, with the first intake focusing on events for June till September in March 31st, the second stream July 31st for October and December, and then October 31st for focus on January to May events in 2021. Up on the screen here is a flow chart that we're hoping that, I was going to say hopefully it easily explains. Well, it's maybe not at 9:30, but it's our goal that we can incorporate this into our communication and marketing of the program, to try to explain where people fill into which of the various streams. Our plan is to obviously work with communications department, as well as to have some. I'll let it go for a second. To work with the communications department, as well as having some coffee shop meetings with users of the programs in the past, to try to explain where they now fit under this new program. I do. But again, it's not the first time I've looked at it, so. But we would encourage council. We'd love to have council support on both on this Venn diagram, but also their thoughts and feedback on the policy.
Oh, sorry. I was still looking at your diagram. I was tracking my way through it. Councillor Montgomery.
You know, I don't know where this idea that counselors are dumb comes from, but thanks a lot for this, Mark. It's.
I don't know. Who said that?
Maybe someone told
social
you.
media.
No, you guys are struggling to understand this like simple flow chart. It's. So yeah, I have a couple questions, anyways. One is, do you have an idea? Like, is there a proposed amount budgeted for the rec and cultural events? Like, do you have a recommendation?
So our proposal to council, included in the budget, is the same amount as existing from previous years for the CIF funding, which is $20,000. This would allow us to kind of understand how this program is working for year 1, and then come back with a review to council for the subsequent budget for 2021.
Okay. And can you give me an example of like an economic development initiative that we would be interested in funding?
I believe one we had last year was the Stick Around Downtown.
Okay.
That's one where we identified it as for a for-profit business. Obviously, the economic development team is still in working through their process. That's why there's not a specific stream allocated for them, and that's why the flow chart just directs them to the economic development office. And once we kind of get their team back up, then we can amend the policy and tighten up anything that may fit into a better stream at that point.
Okay, and my final question is, what is the process, or is there a mechanism for like a one-off festival or celebration from a group that is not a registered community organization? Like, let's say there's just a group of, people that want to put on a big festival in the park or something like that.
Sorry?
I just tell them to go partner with somebody.
Yeah, that one of the things that we're exploring is the idea of block parties, something like that. We're still kind of hashing through that idea where just a group of citizens can put forward together to organize a block party or some sort of event. But again, that's something that we feel that it doesn't fall in the needs of in the model of the CIP program. but that's something that we're exploring and to see if there's support from council moving forward.
But so like if somebody wanted to like say have something in Kinsman Park though, and they're not like a registered group, is there a mechanism for that?
If someone's looking to hold an event in Kinsman Park, we still have a process for them to book space, or it's a first come, first serve. That would not prevent them from hosting an event in that capacity.
Yeah.
This is just a way to access funds. In the event that, and that's the one thing the flow chart talks about, that if you feel that you don't fit in any of these roles, or any of these streams, I should say, that to contact the town, and that there still may be a mechanism for them to get some support for their event.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the answers.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Corbeil, Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it is very much so. Thank you, Mark, for the report. I had a couple of questions. On our flow chart, it says like facility request. I know that we can't say give ice. I would actually like to revisit how we donate space in general anyway, so I'm not even sure if I like that one on there. The only thing that confused me is, yep, I get it. When you're following this flow chart, you get to a donation or sponsorship. And it doesn't really say what to do, and it doesn't really say on here that, it doesn't fall within the scopes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can understand that through the chair. We feel that we're trying to revise our program for facility donation requests, try to view it more as a sponsorship. One of the initiatives we're trying to work with the chamber is to support their annual business awards, where the town can get recognition in some capacity as an event sponsor for the night in lieu of some potential facility donations. We're hoping that would then eventually maybe fall under an economic development stream. And that's why we've kind of hit that little bit of a how to deal with facility requests. Obviously, some of the other facility requests we've got in the past are from the Lions and other groups like that, where we want to get their support, but not technically in a cash donations capacity. So it's something that we could definitely look on and just funnel to, or maybe make some changes to funnel directly to economic development.
And then my other thing, economic development streams, will that still come to us for some kind of, I like to know what goes on, like for the CIF program and stuff like that. An economic development stream, it would still come towards us. It just doesn't go through this grant. Is that what this means?
That's our I guess our proposal, that anything that would be viewed as economic development would be funneled towards the economic development office, and at that point it would be brought to council as a mechanism. Obviously, that's something that's still unknown at this time, so we've kind of left it open just so that we can deal with those one-off situations until the economic development office is stable, and then they can draft the policy or amend it accordingly.
Okay, and so my other question for that is, are you guys recommending an amount set for that specifically as well for a budget line?
We are not at this time.
Okay, and then my last, I think it's one of my last ones anyways. Is this everything that we donated, like on the 2019 Community Investment Fund allocation?
That's correct.
Okay, I think that we donated the Civic Center for the midgets, provincials, did we not?
I'll have to double check that. We tried to cross-reference all our donation requests, so that may be something that's missing, but I'll have to review that one if we're missing it from a facility donation request.
I think it was for the Civic Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Well, it's a lot of work for $20,000. It just seems like a tremendous amount of work for $20,000. And part of me just wants to say, why don't we just give this money to FCSS and put it under 5102? And then you'd come over here and kill me, and you'd be well within your rights to do that.
Through the chair.
Your Worship, if I may, we're only budgeting $20,000 to allocate in 2019 grants. There are grants that we've approved in this fiscal year that will carry into next year. And so the total amount is actually $140,000. And that includes grants that this council is committed to the Key Schneider Playground, the Wheatland Society of Arts Association, the Christmas Hamper, the Festival of Lights, Stars. So it's not just the 20,000.
I know that. I know what's
Okay.
embedded in budget.
Yeah.
And what's left for decision.
Correct.
That's still a lot of work for $20,000 that remains, and I acknowledge that. So as I'm going through this, it was, I didn't read it till Monday, and it wasn't enough time, because as I went through piece by piece, I was thinking about all the things that we'd funded previously and the bump ups that we'd had and what could be the possible downfalls. One of the ones that I thought about was in terms of that dual arrow in donation and sponsorship, when it comes to groups like the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, Hope Covenant, that have done that, and we've always just done that discretionary in kind and given that, and I know you've put a lot of thought into that, and I think that we'll get some pushback on that. I don't believe that we should just do in kind. I think that there needs to be acknowledgement, as you talked about, and I think that there should also be, some kind of a mutual, mutually beneficial process that happens when we do those. But I also think that when we eliminate those church groups from that donation possibility, and maybe we want to change the dates and the times so they're not in prime times, I understand all of that. But I do think that it impacts how they are perceived economically. So for instance, they're a nonprofit. They are what's keeping our restaurants open, because it is the church groups that are patronizing the restaurants on weekends. And I think that is one area that we'll get a lot of pushback on. I think there's some room to move in it. I appreciate the work that you did on the project overall.
Your Worship, if I may, church groups were excluded in the last policy, and that was the discussion that we had. They're by no means need to be excluded, and that's at the discretion of council whether they want to make them an eligible a group or not. Yeah.
I think there needs to be some. Sorry.
Do you want to follow her
Yeah.
statement?
I think there should be some advantage. There should be some mutual benefit to us granting that. So maybe it's looking at non-optimum times, and still acknowledging the economic benefit they bring to community overall.
Your Worship, through the chair, that's a really great point. One of the things we felt was a big gap in the last program is that the town didn't build in any mechanisms to do that mutual relationship. It was always just what we were giving to the third party. And so under Mark's guidance on this program, we've developed stronger contracts and agreements. And so we can build those things in to show what we want reciprocated. And sometimes it's as simple as an opportunity to provide information on social programs. Sometimes it's advertising, and sometimes it's filling our non-prime time opportunities. And so we can definitely ensure that we do those things.
Thank you. Thank you both. Councillor Sobel.
Very quickly, thank you, Mark, for this. Is it your intention to have a member of council on the committee of council that's going to make some of these recommendations or decisions?
Excuse me, through the chair, at this time, we would model our committee group very similar to the CIF one, recognizing that there would be some challenges and the hurdles that we have faced in the past with trying to find members of the community to sit on that and without any potential biases. So at this time, we're not proposing that, but that's something that's up for consideration that we would bring forward to council before our first intake.
I know that's coming later after the, in a future meeting, but I don't know what my fellow councilors think of this, but I would not object to seeing a non-voting member on that council.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sobel. And Mark, thank you. Oh, Councillor Cox. Okay. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I recommend that council adopt policy 7204, Community Improvement Program Policy, and that council rescind policy 1208, Community Investment Program Policy.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cox. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Oh, did you want to speak to the motion, Councillor Peterson?
So I just have questions. So changes, you know, we've talked about some changes here. Should they not be thought about before we adopt this? And I'm speaking specifically to, it's just a policy, I know. It directs all our work. I'm thinking specifically about donation and sponsorship in terms of nonprofit groups, and particularly churches. I'm thinking about the issues of donating ice, as you talked about, and the idea of having a member of council on the committee. Are those things that we should wait to consider as we adopt a policy?
Yeah, I think, yes, I agree. I think that would be something that would be important if we do want to make some additions to the policy.
Your worship, if I may speak to that.
Tracy?
So the eligibility group is in the procedure, which can be amended by the CAO until we can make that amendment to ensure that church groups are recognized as a nonprofit and are eligible. The facility requests aren't captured in this policy because they're not a cash contribution. And so at council's direction, we can bring back for discussion a more formal process on how to do facility donations.
Does that meet your concerns, Councillor Peterson, your comments? James, did you want to weigh in? Your light was on.
I just had one thing to say at the end, if I may, Your Worship.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have a question, like, it's in a policy about we don't give away ice, right? Like that we don't.
Through the chair, Your Worship, that would be correct. It's a very outdated policy, and so when we come talk to council about facility allocation, we can start having those conversations, and then we can start looking at putting some stronger parameters around facility donations and who we donate to and at what percentage. There's some really good best practices out there in Alberta around that we'd like to, as a next step, come to council and talk about.
That would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
I just wanted to say that you've just been stellar in stepping up with all the extra work you've done, and I know this council is very appreciative of the work you've taken on.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we do have a motion on the floor, and I believe. Good job, Mark.
Thank you, James.
We do have a
Thank you,
motion
Thomas.
on the floor.
I know I'm no Chuck, but I do appreciate it.
All in favor of the motion? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you again, Mark, for your time and efforts. And that brings us to item 9.4. We have sulfur storage investigation, which has far too many S's in it for me because I have a lisp.
Good evening.
Welcome tonight, Michael.
Thank you. So on October 2nd, Council made a resolution that Council directs CAO Thackeray to initiate an investigation focused on determining the presence of abnormally high quantities of sulfur in the vicinity of our municipality and whether such quantities have physical or health threat to the community. So I took the investigation on, started the investigation on October 3rd, concluded my investigation on October 30th, and I'll outline what I did during the investigations and my findings. I did locate 2 locations in the vicinity of Strathmore within a 12-kilometer radius that potentially could have had or did have a stockpile of bulk sulfur. One location was northeast of Strathmore, approximately 12.2 kilometers. That site, I spoke with the site manager myself on another investigation, and I was advised by him there is no longer any sulfur on that facility, that site. I also talked to Sergeant Perman of Wheatland County, who is also conducting a parallel investigation on the facility and other facilities, and he also determined that there is no sulfur left on that facility. That facility is now under a stop work order initiated by Whelan County, and they can no longer enter that facility to do an on-site investigation at this point. The second location is Range Road 241 and Highway 1, again approximately 12 kilometers directly east of Strathmore. I spoke again with Sergeant Perman because he was also doing another investigation on that facility. It's in Wheatland County. Sergeant Perman was made aware on October 2nd. On October 2nd, he determined through an on-site inspection that there was 3 piles of sulfur, approximately 6 feet tall. He only estimated that because he was standing there in a standard dump truck load. He went back on October 7th to do a quantity inspection on those piles and determined that those piles were no longer on the site. They had been mixed to make fertilizer, and they are no longer deemed, and those piles have now been moved to other facilities and sold for farmer fertilizer. They've been mixed with gravel and other products. I then went to Canutech, which is the Canadian Transport Emergency Center, and got some information on what sulfur does, what it is, and determined that if there was a fire involving bulk sulfur, dry sulfur, the evacuation zone is about 800 meters, and that is a fully involved fire. So given the fact we are 12 kilometers away, I believe 2 things. One, there is no longer bulk sulfur at Site 1 and Site 2, and what there is not a threat to the community, if there is any there left at all. Once it's mixed to make a fertilizer form, it's not considered controlled substance, it's fertilizer.
Thank you for your report. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you. Thanks for this, Mike. So were you provided with the address of where the pile of concern of sulfur of concern was located?
When I talked to Sergeant Perman, he said that the address is on the corner of Range Road 241 and
but
Highway.
through our office?
Sorry?
Was that not provided
Nope.
to you from our office?
No, it was not.
Okay, because the pile that we were talking about was more like 60 feet high.
There was on October 2nd
And it was
when
at a specific address that I provided. All right, thank you.
Is that the facility?
That's
the second one.
That's number 2?
Yeah.
And it was 6 feet?
Chris is approximately 6 feet
Yeah,
tall.
yeah.
When he looked at it, he said it was about just slightly over his
Okay,
head.
that's fine. Okay, thank you.
3 piles, and they were just a dump truck load. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Thank you for your report, Michael.
Thank you.
And that brings us to 9.5, council committee appointments, public members on page 48. Jennifer Sawatsky.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has received 2 applications from 2 members of the public to sit on the Sustainability Committee, Mr. Adam Stone and I believe Ms. Surindi Morgan. The committee, oh my goodness. No, thank you. The applicants were reviewed by the council nomination committee. Thank you. It's really late. Nomination committee, and the nomination committee is recommending the appointments.
Before you hurt yourself any further, Jen, Councillor Peterson.
Do you want me to make the motion?
Yes,
Your Worship.
please.
That council accept the recommendation for committee appointments from the nomination committee as presented for the appointments to the Sustainability Committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that's mercifully over. 9.6, Memorandum of Understanding between the Town of Strathmore and Siksika Nation. Jennifer, is that you again, or is that James?
Thank you, Your Worship. Before council tonight is a proposed draft MOU, which would continue the process and the collaboration between the two councils and the two communities of Siksika and Strathmore. This MOU is being worked on by our town clerk, Ms. Sawatsky, and myself, as well as the mayor and members of council, and we were very, very pleased to support this should council wish to move this forward and propose this to Siksika. And we would put this forward for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Any comments from council? Councillor Bauer?
I would just like to say, Your Worship, I was very impressed with administration and the amount of other documents and other partnerships that they looked at in order to draft this MOU. This is one of the first MOUs that I have seen in my term, and although there may have been others, but I was especially moved by the words, especially the first sentence, whereas Siksika Nation Council and the Town of Strathmore Council have a mutual respect for each other's values, policies, and areas of jurisdiction, that you also took into account the United Nations Declaration, and then we added the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, and that we are being so inclusive in this document. I think it really sets the stage and for further understanding and cultural acceptance both ways for each of our communities, and I look forward to working with Siksika Nation further, and I would just like to say thank you to everyone on the Council of Siksika and the council that is sitting here today, because every member here has put a really strong commitment further to further a relationship with our Siksika neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Much appreciated. And I echo that as well. Thank you for all your efforts. And I want to thank council for all your dedication and passion and being interested in improving things and working hard to do that. So you're looking for a motion from us, are you not, Jen, to adopt this or to? And then just before we do that, you'll be taking care of getting it in either PDF or Word document to Councillor Ruben Buckbreaker tomorrow? Thank you. So, council? James?
Your Worship, would it be appropriate to discuss possible dates for, assuming both parties are acceptable? There was one or two dates proposed. I understand it. Would this be an appropriate time, or if not, we could defer it to another time?
I think we have one that was tentatively discussed, but I imagine they're going to discuss this as their council regarding this MOU, so maybe we can touch base with them and come back to you with a potential date.
But
So,
I wonder, is there any damage with naming that date, Your Worship, just so people can perhaps?
we can mention it as a tentative date as far as Friday, November 15th, 11 a.m.
That was Councillor Breaker's.
Councillor Peterson?
I think it would be respectful, Your Worship, to wait until their council has had a chance to look at this memorandum and approve or disapprove it.
Sure. I'm good with that as well. So I guess we're just looking for a motion then regarding the MOU. Approval by our council. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that the Town of Strathmore Council accept the memorandum of understanding between Siksika Nation and the Town of Strathmore, and we further direct Mayor and Administration to send this memorandum of understanding with our ask that it be brought before the Siksika Nation Council for their consideration. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for that motion. Councillor Bauer?
Just further to the motion, I would just like to let everyone know that this memorandum of agreement is not a binding legal agreement and does not present any binding legal obligations on either party. It's just a memorandum of understanding that we're going to be working together into the future. So just so that everyone is aware, it does not state in this agreement that there is any legal obligation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bauer. You've all heard the motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Which brings us to item 10, committee reports. 10.1, committees established by council.
Your Worship, I had 3 reports, but I will wait in consideration of the time for another meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Sobel?
I have 2. One is Chamber of Commerce, which I'll allow to go. I'll put it forth to the next meeting. But I do want to read the sustainability one because I have a motion that follows it. The committee met on October 28th. The idling signs, which promotes the town's policy of using caution when idling vehicles, are ordered and will be here shortly. Plan is to have them available for posting in front of all municipal buildings, health centers, schools, and our downtown in the near future. The committee is also in the process of conducting a survey aimed at our residents and inviting suggestions pertaining to water conservation. Some responses have been received and continue to be discussed by the group. And finally, the committee discussed the idea of extending support for EPR, or extended producer responsibility. This is a project being spearheaded by Calgary City Councillor Peter Demong and is presently in the hands of AUMA, or the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, who are devising a plan to get this matter before provincial legislature. Alberta's municipalities are struggling with increased municipal recycling costs. Lack of action by the government of Alberta is forcing municipalities to spend more to operate residential recycling programs. Our Sustainability Committee voted unanimously to request Council to provide a letter of support directed to the Alberta Minister of Environment with copies to the Alberta Minister of Municipal Affairs, our local MLA, the President of AUMA, and the President of Rural Alberta Municipalities of Alberta. And with that, I would move that a letter be prepared by administration to be signed by the Mayor on behalf of Council, requesting the Government of Alberta take immediate action to develop a permanent EPR paper and packaging program, to expand current recycling programs to accept new materials that are currently going to our landfills, but which could and should be recycled, and to amend the regulations to give Alberta's recycling the flexibility to change the recycling fees.
Thank you very much for that. Anything else, Councillor Sobel?
No, that's my motion.
Okay. Yes, thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? The motion is carried.
Oh, I thought I shut it off. Sorry.
Your
Did you have a
Worship.
question? Sorry.
Councillor Bauer?
We went over 10.1 so quickly that I didn't get a chance to just,
We're still in 10.1.
we are?
Yep.
Okay, my apologies. I have something to add when it's the time.
Committees, should we talk about committees?
Yes.
Okay, did you want to speak now?
Yes, I would like to just make an addendum to the committees on which councillors sit. It was missed, unfortunately, that both Your Worship, our mayor, and myself sit on the Badlands Committee. And I spoke to Ms. Sawatsky, and she has asked me to add it during this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. 10.2, council reports from committees on which they sit. Oh, sorry, we need a motion for 10.1. Deputy Mayor Corbeil?
I move we accept the reports for information.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. 10.2, council reports from committees on which the Jennifer Sawatsky.
Sorry, Your Worship. Your Worship, I believe we do need a motion for council to appoint Councillor Bauer and yourself to the Badlands Committee.
Thank you for that. Councillor Montgomery.
I will move that we appoint Mayor Fuel and Councillor Bauer to the Canadian Badlands Association.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Now, 10.2, council reports from committees on which they sit. We'll wait on those, thank you very much. And item 11, items directly related to council. 11.1, notice of motion regarding Airbnbs. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I trust that you've all had an opportunity to look at my recommendation in the report summary. I'd like to speak to the recommendation now. Although home share listings in Strathmore are relatively low, the opportunities our residents have to leverage personal and rental properties during our current economic downturns are high. Currently, sites like Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, and other rental websites and apps capture a huge share of the accommodation market in Airbnb, a huge share of the accommodation market. In 2019, Calgary Airbnb hosts earned $18 million this summer, according to the company. It's our responsibility as government officials to ensure the safety of both guests and property owners in our community. I do not wish to discourage short-term rentals in our community, but recognize that with our proximity to Calgary and affordable pricing options, we should be ahead of the game and regulate safety and proper behavior so that if and when short-term rentals move into your neighborhood, they're good neighbors. More than 137,000 guests registered between May 24th and September 2nd, up 35% from 2018 according to Airbnb. This income is providing supplemental income for families in Calgary, helping make their lives more affordable. Looking at fire and safety regulations, including smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detection and warning systems, fire extinguishers, windows and exit, all make for a safer environment for hosts. I would like administration to look into the feasibility of having home share properties in residential, mixed use, or commercial areas and allow us to decide as a council if our residents are supportive or not. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So are you bringing forward a motion then?
I have a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
I move that council direct administration to investigate adding a requirement for a business license in order to operate an Airbnb or other home share opportunity in the town of Strathmore, as well as a requirement to display signage indicating that the accommodation has been approved.
Thank you for that motion, and we have the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Yeah, I have a quick question, actually. Thank you, Your Worship. Do we know how many are in Strathmore?
Through the chair. If I'm able to answer that, Councillor, would you mind turning yours?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me.
If I may answer that, if you go and do a search, there are 24 listed properties in the area. If you actually look at those 24, it narrows it down to under 5 that are actually in Strathmore. And then if you look to those 5, yes, then there's only about 2. And there are some illegal ones that are operating. I found out through some of the international students in Strathmore that some parents do come and they stay in homes of people that they know and whatnot. It's essentially a home share type of accommodation. They are making an agreement with the homeowner, but there's no regulations in place. And sometimes this proves to be quite lucrative, and they're doing it over and over again for other people that are coming from the same country. So there is kind of a bit of mixed use within our community. I wouldn't say that it's a problem. If anything, I would just believe that this would be proactive, and given our proximity to Calgary, it's something that could be on our purview.
Thank you for that explanation. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I want to commend Councillor Bauer for being proactive in this area, but with two possible units that we have in our community, I'm not going to support this. I think our administration is sufficiently tasked with enough items at this point where this may be one that we want to put off for a period of time, perhaps years, until there's a substantial issue that we're dealing with. To date, we've got no reports of any issues that I'm aware of. I just can't support adding another item to administration's task list at this point for something that we don't have an issue with.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also am not in a place where I feel that with our economy the way it is, that we can divert any issues away from the 4 to 5 hotels that we already have in Strathmore. There is no reason why they can't be utilized, and I just don't see that us authorizing legal Airbnbs to take away business from legitimate businesses in Strathmore. That's
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I think that authorizing or licensing Airbnbs is an important thing to do. And I think that there are lots of them operating in the community. Not lots. I think there are several not operating as Airbnbs, but just operating under the radar. And I think offering business license to those, bringing them into the mainstream economy is a good idea. I think it's a safety issue, and I think it's a sound, and it especially comes up, I know, when there are major events. During the Calgary Stampede, when you look here, it takes a sharp jump for people staying in here. And I think that having them licensed actually would boost support for our existing hotels and motels in the community, as opposed to taking their time away, because having a business license would mean that you had to also follow the rules. So I agree with this motion. I think it's a great recommendation. I think it's one of safety, and I understand Councillor's concern with the work that's on the plate of administration, but if they were to get it done within the next 6 months, like prior to next summer, I think it's a viable recommendation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Just a quick question to admin, to Jen. Do you foresee how much work would be involved in Ryan?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ultimately, the process of adding the requirement for a business license is not a large process for staff. It's the enforcement that ends up being time-consuming. If staff were to put an amendment to the business license and then set a good long grace period, call it, in the next 9 months or something, please come register, that starts getting people who are interested trickle in and doesn't generate a lot of work. And then, enforcement is just on a sort of as required basis. Either based on complaints or the occasional search Airbnb. So as far as, this doesn't have to be a lot of work. If council ends up wanting a program with development permits and a lot more regulation in terms of what goes into these, if there's notification to neighbors, that's a larger process. That's, I won't want to say a big deal, but that's more time. However, just the business license requirement that's I very much appreciate Councillor Sobel's concern about staff workload, but that's when we can accommodate.
Councillor Cox and then Councillor Sobel.
Your Worship. Thank you, Ryan. But can you tell me, though, we go ahead and we approve a license for them, who inspects the house to make sure?
Municipality has a responsibility. We would have to write them into our quality management plan for inspections, and we would inspect them annually, like any other business where there's a public safety component. We would then do that.
Do they have to follow the same rules and regulations that a hotel would have to follow?
For the most part, yep, they would. Like, when I was in Banff, we inspected hundreds of bed and breakfasts every year. And our application of the code was a little bit different. We were a little more supportive and tactful and didn't shake the code at them as much as we had to with the bigger hotels sometimes. But there, you know, we focus more on the housekeeping stuff and not as much on the you must, you shall, you will.
And what about with respect to the fact, is it Canmore that doesn't allow any,
They don't allow
any Airbnb
In certain areas.
in Canmore?
They disallowed all trailers, like those trailers that were there in the park.
Yeah.
They did disallow.
Yeah.
In some areas.
So, yeah, so, and personally, I live beside an Airbnb, or I sometimes spend time beside an Airbnb. This isn't a bad idea.
No, I live across.
Your worship, if council wishes to begin restricting areas of the communities or neighborhoods or regions, that is a land use bylaw amendment. Perhaps, if I may, staff can, before we work into this, just given council's concerns about workload and what this can morph into, would be to bring council a brief project charter to see if there's interest in directing staff to take this on. We could include different options that could include everything from business license through to land use restrictions, and then just give council the option of what sort of regulatory regime we proceed with.
So that fits in with the recommendation of investigator. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Ryan. James? Yep, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor directing administration. If there's no further discussion, Councillor Montgomery?
Well, I'll just say, like, I'm honestly more concerned about the time it'll take to investigate and kind of put together a comprehensive report and then with recommendations than I am the actual, you know, it's easy to just say, okay, yeah, you know, you gotta, you know, get a business license. But, you know, like, it's like, are we gonna be, you know, like, how many home sharing, you know, like, companies are we gonna be investigating? How many, you know, like, are we gonna be, you know, if somebody wants to rent out their house, you know, for a month, you know, do we have a problem with that? Or is it, you know, is it 29 days? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a week? Is it, you know, 2 days? Like, I can see, you know, I can see where Councillor Bauer's coming from and Councillor Peterson. I think that, you know, like, this is something that, you know, we should be, you know, mindful of. But I'm concerned about, I guess, yeah, redirecting staff. And I'm not sure about how deep this rabbit hole could go. So I'm concerned about something that might not be a problem at this point, that it might be something we could focus on in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Bauer?
There were some other things that I would like to, that I wanted to say in summary. And I'm just going to ask if we could postpone this to the next meeting, please.
Okay, so you're going to
I would ask
rescind your
to-
motion then?
I would ask to postpone, yes, rescind my motion and postpone it for the meeting on November 27th.
Or do you want to leave the motion on and then defeat it? No.
Are we allowed to go over then?
Yeah, Your Worship,
Jennifer?
you can leave the motion on the floor and just postpone the matter till the next meeting.
Very much, so we're going to do that then. All right,
Except Your Worship,
yes.
we do need a motion to postpone it, though.
Okay, we need a motion to postpone this.
Is it postpone or table? Postpone? So I would move that we postpone recommendation on agenda item number 11.1 to the November 20th, well, 20th until we change it, so November 20th meeting.
Thank you very much for that motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Deputy Mayor Corbeil?
I motion we adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.